Welcome to Echoes of Stories, where shadows whisper secrets and every footstep echoes with mystery. Today, we continue our journey through one of Sherlock Holmes's most gripping and dangerous investigations. A man lies dead in a locked room. A cryptic message is scrawled on a torn scrap of paper, and the treasure that once tempted men's souls has vanished without a trace. This is part 2. The chase begins, continuing the Sign of Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In this chapter, Holmes follows a trail of footprints no one else can see. Watson stands closer than ever to the brave and gentle Miss Morstan, and a hidden pact, sealed years ago in a faraway land, returns to haunt those who once thought themselves safe. If you're joining us for the first time, thank you. Here at Echoes of Stories, we bring classic detective tales to life with immersive narration and haunting atmosphere. So if you love stories that twist the mind and chill the spine, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share this journey with fellow lovers of mystery. This is The Sign of Four. Part 2. The chase begins.
Now, Watson, we've got half an hour to ourselves. Let's use it wisely. As I told you, the case is almost solved. But we mustn't fall into the trap of overconfidence. It may look simple now, but there might be something deeper behind it.
Simple.
Certainly. Sit in that corner, so your footprints don't interfere. Let's get to work. First question, how did they come, and how did they leave? The door hasn't been opened since last night. What about the window?
He carried the lamp to the window, muttering observations more to himself than to me.
The window's locked from the inside. Solid frame. No hinges on the side. Let's open it. No drain pipe nearby. Roof is out of reach. Still, someone climbed in through this window. It rained a bit last night. Here's a footprint in the mud on the sill. And there's a circular muddy mark here on the floor, and again near the table. Look at this, Watson. Quite a neat demonstration.
I looked closely at the round, clear muddy prints. I said, "That's not a footprint."
It's more useful than that. It's the mark of a wooden stump. Look here. On the sill is a boot print, a heavy one with a broad metal heel. And right next to it is the imprint of a timber toe.
The man with the wooden leg.
Exactly. But he wasn't alone. He had a capable accomplice. Could you scale that wall, Doctor?
I leaned out the window. The moon lit the corner of the building. We were at least 60 feet above the ground. No footholds, no cracks in the wall. No way. I answered. Absolutely impossible.
Alone, yes. But suppose a friend was up here and lowered the strong rope I see in the corner, tied to that big wall hook. Then, if you were agile, even with a wooden leg, you could climb up. And to leave, you'd go the same way. Your friend would pull up the rope, untie it, close the window, lock it, and escape the way he came in. Now a small point.
He ran his fingers along the rope.
Our wooden-legged friend was a decent climber, but no sailor. His hands weren't rough. My lens shows several blood marks, especially near the end of the rope. He slid down so fast he scraped the skin from his palms.
All of that makes sense, but who is this mysterious accomplice? How did he even enter the room?
The ally. This is where the case gets truly interesting. I believe this accomplice is quite unique in the history of crime in this country. Although, there are cases from India, and if I recall correctly, even from Senegambia that might compare.
Then how did he get in? The door's locked, and the window's impossible. Could it be the chimney?
The grate's far too small. I've already ruled that out.
Then how?
You're not applying my rule, Watson. How many times have I told you? Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. He didn't come through the door, window, or chimney. He couldn't have hidden in the room. So where did he come from?
He came through the hole in the roof.
Exactly. He had to. Hold the lamp for me. We're going up to the hidden room where the treasure was found.
Holmes climbed the steps, grabbed a rafter with both hands, and pulled himself up into the attic. Lying flat, he reached down for the lamp and held it while I followed. The attic was about 10 feet long and 6 wide. Its floor was just beams with thin plaster between them. You had to step beam to beam. The roof peaked at the top, and clearly formed the inside of the house's true roof. There was no furniture, only years of thick dust.
Look here.
He said, placing his hand on the slanted wall.
This is a trapdoor to the roof. I'll push it open. There, see the sloping roof? That's how number one got in. Let's look for any signs that might tell us more about him.
As Holmes lowered the lamp toward the floor, I noticed the startled look on his face again. My own skin turned cold. The floor was covered with the clear, small prints of a bare foot, delicate and perfect, but only half the size of a grown man's. I said, "Holmes, it was a child who did this awful thing."
I was taken aback for a second, but it makes perfect sense. I should have remembered. There's nothing more to see here. Let's go back down.
What's your theory about those footprints?
Try some analysis yourself, Watson. You know my methods. Use them. Let's compare.
I can't think of anything that fits the facts.
You'll get it soon enough. I don't think there's anything else important here, but I'll take another look.
He pulled out his lens and tape measure and crawled around the room, nose close to the floor, eyes sharp and focused. He moved with the stealth and precision of a bloodhound. It struck me how dangerous he could have been if he'd used his talents for crime. As he searched, he kept muttering, then suddenly gave a shout of excitement.
We're in luck. This just got a lot easier. Number one stepped in creosote. You can see the small footprint right here, beside this awful-smelling mess. The container cracked and leaked.
So what does that mean?
It means we've got him. I know a dog that could follow this scent to the ends of the earth. If hounds can track a herring across a county, imagine what they'll do with the smell. It's like a math problem. The result leads us to wait. Here comes the official law enforcement.
Heavy footsteps and loud voices echoed from downstairs. The front door slammed.
Before they come up, put your hand on this man's arm. And here on his leg. What do you feel?
His muscles are rock hard.
Exactly. Extreme muscle contraction. Worse than typical rigor mortis. Add in the facial distortion, the twisted expression, what the old writers called risus sardonicus. What does that tell you?
Death from a powerful vegetable alkaloid. Something like strychnine that causes tetanus.
Exactly what I thought. I checked for how the poison got in and found that thorn embedded in his scalp. Notice, it hit the exact part of the head, facing the ceiling if he was sitting upright. Look at it.
I carefully held the thorn under the lantern. It was long, sharp, and black, its tip coated with a dried, gummy substance. The blunt end had been neatly trimmed with a knife.
That's not an English thorn, is it?
No, it definitely isn't.
With all this evidence, you should be able to make a solid deduction. But here come the professionals. We can step back now.
Footsteps approached. A heavy-set, red-faced man in a gray suit stormed in. His tiny eyes peeked out between swollen cheeks. An inspector in uniform and a very shaken Thaddeus Sholto followed closely behind.
What a mess. A real mess. Who are all these people? This house is packed like a rabbit warren.
I believe you remember me, Mr. Athelney Jones.
Of course. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the theorist. I won't forget your lecture about causes and effects in the Bishopgate case. Sure, you pointed us in the right direction, but luck helped more than logic.
It was basic reasoning.
Now, don't be modest. But what's going on here? Bad business. Real bad. Thankfully, I was nearby working another case. I was at the station when the report came in. What's your take on the cause of death?
This one's not for me to speculate on.
Still, you do hit the mark, sometimes. So, door locked. Jewels worth $500,000 missing. How about the window?
Locked, but there are footprints on the sill.
Then those prints can't matter. The window's locked, right? Common sense. Maybe the man died from seizure, but then the jewels are gone. Wait, I've got it.
He turned toward the sergeant and Thaddeus.
You two step out. Holmes's friend can stay. Here's my theory. Sholto admits he was with his brother last night. The brother dies, Sholto walks off with the treasure. What do you think?
And then the dead man kindly got up and locked the door from the inside.
That's a snag. Let's think logically. Thaddeus was with his brother. They argued, we know that. The brother's dead. The jewels are missing. No one saw him after Thaddeus left. His bed was unused. Thaddeus is clearly agitated. Doesn't look great either. You see, I'm tightening the net around Thaddeus. It's closing in.
You're still missing some key facts. This splinter of wood, which I have strong reason to believe is poisoned, was stuck in the man's scalp. You can still see the mark. This card, as you can see, was lying on the table, and beside it, there was this odd, stone-headed instrument. How do those fit into your theory?
Perfectly. The house is full of Indian curiosities. Thaddeus brought them here, and if that splinter's poisonous, he could have used it just as easily as anyone else. The card's just a trick, probably to throw us off. The only question is, how did he get away? Of course, this hole in the roof.
He does find things.
Holmes muttered with a shrug.
He has flashes of intelligence. Il and y apodosatis I incommodes case succa ont de l'esprit.
You see,
He said, coming back down.
facts beat theories every time. My case is solid. There's a trapdoor to the roof, and it's open.
I opened it.
Oh, did you? So, you noticed it first?
He looked slightly deflated.
Well, whoever noticed it, it proves how the man escaped. Inspector.
From the hallway, I could hear the inspector promptly acknowledge with a respectful tone.
Bring in Mr. Sholto. Mr. Sholto, it's my duty to inform you that anything you say can be used against you. I arrest you in the Queen's name for involvement in your brother's death.
At that, Thaddeus threw up his hands in despair, glancing helplessly at each of us. He cried out,
There now. Didn't I tell you this would happen?
Don't worry, Mr. Sholto. I'm confident I can clear you of this charge.
Don't make promises. You can't keep, Mr. Theorist. You may find it tougher than you think.
Not only will I clear him, Mr. Jones, but I'll even give you the name and description of one of the two men who were here last night. His name, I believe, is Jonathan Small. He's poorly educated, short, agile, missing his right leg, and walks with a wooden stump that's worn on the inside. His left boot has a square toe and an iron heel band. He's middle-aged, deeply sunburned, and an ex-convict. These clues should help you, especially since there's missing skin on the palm of his hand. As for the other man,
Yes, the other man?
he said mockingly, though I could tell he was impressed by Holmes's precise tone.
he's rather unusual. I hope I'll be able to introduce you to both of them soon. Watson, a word.
Holmes led me out to the top of the stairs.
This sudden turn of events has made us forget why we came here in the first place.
I was just thinking the same. Miss Morstan shouldn't be left in this house of death.
Agreed. You must take her home. She stays with Mrs. Cecil Forrester in Lower Camberwell. It's not far. I'll wait here if you're willing to come back. Unless you're too tired.
Not at all. Honestly, I couldn't rest until I know more about this bizarre case. I've seen rough times, but tonight's series of strange surprises has truly shaken me. But I want to stay with you and see this through.
Your help will be valuable. We'll work independently and leave Jones to enjoy chasing whatever dead-end theory he comes up with. Once you've dropped off Miss Morstan, go to number 3, Pinchin Lane, near the water in Lambeth. The third house on the right is a bird stuffer's shop. Sherman's the name. You'll see a weasel holding a rabbit in the window. Wake up old Sherman and tell him, with my compliments, that I need Toby immediately. Bring him back in the cab.
A dog, I assume?
Yes, a strange mutt, but with an extraordinary nose. I'd rather have Toby than the entire London police force.
I'll bring him. It's 1 o'clock now. I should be back before 3, if I can get a fresh horse.
Excellent. In the meantime, I'll see what I can learn from Mrs. Burnstone, and the Indian servant Mr. Thaddeus told me sleeps in the next attic. Then I'll observe the great Jones in action and enjoy his subtle sarcasms.
The police had brought a cab along, and I accompanied Miss Morstan back to her residence. True to the angelic nature of women, she had kept a calm face throughout, as long as someone more frightened than herself needed comfort. I had found her steady and composed beside the trembling housekeeper. But once we were inside the cab, the emotional strain took its toll. First she turned faint, then burst into tears, overwhelmed by the night's events. Later, she confided in me that she found me cold and distant during that ride. But she never knew the storm inside me, the effort it took to restrain myself. My heart, my sympathies, even my love had reached out to her, just like my hand had in the garden. A lifetime of social decorum couldn't have taught me more about her sweet, brave character than this single extraordinary day had done. Yet, 2 reasons kept me from speaking any words of affection. First, she was emotionally fragile and vulnerable. It would have been unfair to bring love into such a moment. Second, she was wealthy. If Holmes's investigation succeeded, she'd inherit a fortune. Would it be honorable for a modest, half-pay surgeon to pursue her under such circumstances? Would she think me a gold digger? That thought alone was unbearable. This agra treasure had become an invisible wall between us. It was nearly 2 a.m. when we arrived at Mrs. Cecil Forrester's home. The servants had gone to bed long ago, but Mrs. Forrester, intrigued by Miss Morstan's mysterious message, had stayed up awaiting her return. She answered the door herself, a graceful, middle-aged woman, and it warmed my heart to see how gently she wrapped her arms around Miss Morstan and welcomed her with a motherly voice. Clearly, she was more than just an employer. She was a trusted friend. I was introduced, and Mrs. Forrester kindly asked me to come in and share the full story. But I explained the urgency of my task and promised to return with any updates on our case. As our cab rolled away, I looked back and could still see that image. The 2 women at the doorstep, the soft hall light filtering through stained glass, the polished stair rods, and the peaceful glow of an English home. Such a contrast to the dark chaos we'd been navigating. The more I reflected, the more unsettling the events seemed. As the cab rattled through the quiet, gaslit streets, I mentally replayed everything. We had resolved the original mystery to some extent. Captain Morstan's death, the pearls, the ad, and the anonymous letter. They all made more sense now. But those answers had only led us into a deeper and more tragic puzzle. There was the Indian treasure, the strange map found among Morstan's belongings, the shocking scene of Major Sholto's death, and the immediate murder of the man who found the treasure. Then came the bizarre clues, odd footprints, unusual weapons, and the card with markings that matched Captain Morstan's chart. Truly, it was a twisted maze. Without Holmes's brilliant mind, any ordinary person would have lost hope of finding a way through. Pinchin Lane was a rundown row of 2-story brick houses in the poorer part of Lambeth. I had to knock several times at number 3 before getting a response. Finally, a candle flickered behind the curtain, and a face appeared at the upper window.
Go on, you drunken vagabond. If you make any more noise, I'll open the kennels and let out 43 dogs on you.
If you let out just one, that's exactly why I'm here.
Go on. I swear, I've got a viper in this bag, and I'll drop it on your head if you don't leave.
But I need a dog.
I won't be argued with. Step back, or when I count to 3, down goes the viper.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Those words had an almost magical effect. The window slammed shut instantly, and within a minute, the door opened. Mr. Sherman was a thin, hunched old man with a stringy neck and blue-tinted glasses.
A friend of Mr. Sherlock is always welcome. Come in, sir. Watch out for the badger. He bites. Ah, naughty boy. Would you nip the gentleman?
He said this to a stoat with red eyes peeking through its cage.
Don't mind that one, sir. It's only a slow worm. No fangs. I let it roam to keep beetles away. You'll have to excuse my earlier tone. Kids often tease me, and some folks knock just to bother me. So what does Mr. Holmes want?
He needs one of your dogs.
That would be Toby.
Yes, Toby's the one.
Toby lives at number 7, just down the row on the left.
Sherman led the way with a candle, moving slowly through his odd collection of animals. In the dim light, eyes gleamed at us from every nook and rafter. Even the ceiling beams were lined with sleepy chickens shifting lazily as our voices echoed. Toby turned out to be an awkward-looking, long-haired mix, part spaniel, part lurcher, brown and white, with droopy ears and a waddling gait. After hesitating, he accepted a sugar lump from Sherman and agreed to follow me to the cab. It was 3 a.m. when I returned to Pondicherry Lodge. I learned that McMurdo, the ex-prize fighter, had been arrested as an accomplice, and both he and Mr. Sholto had been taken to the station. 2 constables were guarding the gate, but let me in with the dog after I mentioned the detective's name. Holmes stood on the doorstep, hands in his pockets, pipe in his mouth.
Ah, you have him there. Good dog. Athelney Jones has left. He's been incredibly active since you went. Arrested Thaddeus, the gatekeeper, the housekeeper, and even the Indian servant. It's just us now, apart from a sergeant upstairs. Leave the dog and come on up.
We tied Toby to the hall table and headed upstairs. The room was just as before, except a sheet now covered the central figure. A tired-looking police sergeant lounged in the corner.
Lend me your bullseye lantern, Sergeant. Now tie this bit of card around my neck, so it hangs in front. Thanks. Now I'll need to kick off my boots and socks. Watson, carry them for me. I'm going to do a little climbing. Dip my handkerchief in the creosote. That'll do. Now come up to the garret with me for a moment.
We climbed through the attic hole. Holmes directed his light onto the dusty footprints again.
Look closely at these footprints. Do you notice anything unusual?
They belonged to a child or a small woman.
Beyond their size, anything else?
They seem like ordinary prints to me.
Not at all. See, this is a right footprint. I'll place mine next to it. What's the main difference?
Your toes are cramped together. The other print has distinct toe separations.
Exactly. That's key. Keep that in mind. Now, could you smell the wood near that flap window while I stay here with the handkerchief?
I did as instructed and immediately caught a strong tar-like smell.
That's where he stepped out. If there's a trail, Toby should have no trouble finding it. Now go down, unleash the dog, and be ready to follow Blondin.
By the time I made it outside, Sherlock Holmes was already on the roof. He looked like an enormous glowworm, slowly crawling along the ridge in the moonlight. I lost sight of him briefly behind a stack of chimneys, then caught a glimpse again as he reappeared and disappeared once more on the far side. I made my way around the building and found him sitting near one of the corner eaves.
That you, Watson?
Yes.
This is the spot. What's that black thing down there?
A water barrel.
Is there a lid on it?
Yes.
No sign of a ladder?
None.
Confound the fellow. It's a ridiculously risky place. If he climbed up here, I should be able to climb down. This water pipe feels sturdy enough. Here goes.
I heard his feet scuffling against the wall, and the lantern moved gradually downward. With a light spring, he landed on the barrel and then to the ground.
It was easy enough to follow him. The tiles were disturbed all along, and in his haste, he dropped this. Confirms my diagnosis, as you doctors might say.
He held out a small pouch woven from colored grasses and decorated with cheap beads. It looked a lot like a cigarette case in shape and size. Inside were half a dozen dark wooden spines, pointed at one end and rounded at the other, just like the one that had struck Bartholomew Sholto.
They're wicked things. Don't prick yourself. I'm glad to have them. They're probably all he had, which means you and I won't find one in our skin anytime soon. I'd rather face a martini bullet, to be honest. Are you up for a 6-mile trek, Watson?
Absolutely.
Your leg can handle it?
Oh yes. Holmes bent down.
Come here, Toby. Good dog. Smell it, boy. Take a good sniff.
He held the creosote-soaked handkerchief under Toby's nose. The dog stood still with its legs apart and its head tilted in the funniest way, like a wine connoisseur savoring a vintage bouquet. Holmes tossed the handkerchief aside, tied a strong cord to Toby's collar, and led him to the base of the water barrel. Instantly, the dog let out a series of excited yelps and started off at full speed, nose to the ground and tail in the air, pulling hard against the leash as we ran to keep up. The eastern sky was starting to brighten, and we could see ahead through the cold gray light. Behind us, the large, square house with its dark, empty windows and high, bare walls loomed like a sad and lonely monument. We crossed the grounds, weaving through trenches and pits that scar the landscape. The whole area, dotted with dirt heaps and sparse, stunted shrubs, looked cursed, perfectly reflecting the grim events that had occurred. Toby followed the scent along the boundary wall, whining with excitement. He stopped in a corner hidden by a young beech tree. Where two walls met, a few bricks had been loosened. The gaps in the lower part were worn and rounded, as if they had often been used as footholds. Holmes climbed up and, taking Toby from me, dropped him gently to the other side.
There's the print of the wooden leg's hand. See that little smear of blood on the white plaster? Good thing we haven't had heavy rain since yesterday. The scent should still be traceable despite the long head start.
Even so, I had my doubts. The London roads had seen plenty of foot traffic since then, but Toby quickly eased my concerns. He didn't hesitate once, just waddled forward in his odd rolling gait. Clearly, the sharp scent of creosote overpowered any other odors.
Don't think I'm relying entirely on the lucky break of this man stepping into creosote. I've now gathered enough clues to track them through several different means. But this is the quickest. Since fortune handed us this advantage, it would be careless to ignore it. Still, I regret that it's no longer the neat little intellectual puzzle it once promised to be. This obvious clue has taken away some of the challenge.
There's still plenty of credit to be earned here. Honestly, Holmes, your method of unraveling this case amazes me even more than in the Jefferson Hope murder. It seems even deeper and harder to explain. For example, how were you able to describe the wooden-legged man so confidently?
Oh, come now. It was absurdly simple. I don't want to sound dramatic. It's all very straightforward. Two officers in charge of a convict guard discover an important secret about hidden treasure. An Englishman named Jonathan Small draws them a map. You remember, we saw his name on the chart Captain Morstan had. He signed it on behalf of himself and three others, the so-called Sign of the Four. With this map, one or both of the officers recovered the treasure and brought it to England, likely breaking some promise or agreement made when they received it. So why didn't Jonathan Small get the treasure himself? It's obvious. The chart dates to a time when Morstan was closely involved with convicts. Small didn't retrieve the treasure because he and his associates were convicts themselves, unable to leave.
I said it sounded like mere speculation.
It's more than that. It's the only theory that actually fits the facts. Let's see how well it holds up as we continue. Major Sholto lives in peace for a few years, enjoying the treasure. Then he gets a letter from India that completely shakes him. What could it have been?
A letter saying the men he betrayed had been released?
Or had escaped, that's more likely. He would have known their sentence length, so an early release would have surprised him. Then what does he do? He starts guarding himself against a wooden-legged man, a white man, mind you. He even fires a pistol at a white tradesman he mistakes for him. And on the chart, only one white man's name appears. The others are Hindus or Muslims, so we can confidently say the wooden-legged man is Jonathan Small. Any fault in the logic?
No, it's logical and clear. Holmes continued, urging me to see the case from Jonathan Small's perspective.
Let's imagine we're Jonathan. He comes to England, determined to reclaim what he believes is rightfully his, and to take revenge on the man who betrayed him. He finds Sholto's location and possibly makes contact with someone inside. There's this butler, Lal Rao, whom we haven't met, and Mrs. Burnstone doesn't speak well of him. Still, Small can't find the treasure's location. Only the major and a loyal servant, now dead, ever knew. Suddenly, Small learns the major is dying. In a panic, he bypasses the guards and reaches the dying man's window, but his son's presence deters him from entering. Still seething, he sneaks in later, rummages through the major's papers hoping for a clue, and leaves behind a calling card with a cryptic message. He probably planned that if he killed Sholto, he'd leave such a mark to show it wasn't just murder, it was justice in the eyes of the four. These kinds of strange symbolic gestures are common in crime, and often reveal a lot about the criminal. You follow me?
Perfectly.
So what could Small do next? He'd have to keep quietly watching every attempt to locate the treasure. Maybe he left England and came back now and then. Then the garret gets discovered, and he's immediately informed. That again suggests a contact in the household. With his wooden leg, Small couldn't reach Bartholomew's high room. So he brings a strange partner, who climbs up, but dips his bare foot in creosote, leading us to Toby, and a 6-mile chase for an old army surgeon with a dodgy Achilles tendon.
But it was the associate, not Jonathan, who committed the murder.
Exactly. And Small wasn't thrilled, judging by how he stomped around when he entered. He didn't hate Bartholomew. He would have preferred tying him up, but he couldn't stop his partner's savage instincts. The poison did its job. So Small left his sign, lowered the treasure box, and followed it down. That's the sequence as best I can reconstruct it. As for Small's appearance, he'd be middle-aged, sunburnt from years in the Andamans. His stride gives us his height, and he's bearded. Thaddeus especially noticed how hairy he was. That's all I can deduce so far.
What about the associate?
No great mystery there. You'll find out soon enough. Isn't the morning air wonderful? Look at that one little pink cloud, like a flamingo's feather. And now the red sun's rim rises above London's haze. It shines on many, but I doubt anyone else is out on an errand as strange as ours. Don't you feel small compared to nature's grand scale?
Somewhat. I came to Jean Paul through Carlisle.
So, you followed the stream back to the lake. He once said something profound, that the surest proof of a man's greatness lies in his awareness of his own smallness. It shows he can compare and reflect, which is a noble trait. Richter really makes you think. You're not carrying a pistol, are you?
Just my cane.
That may not be enough. If we find their hideout, Jonathan's yours. But if the other one turns violent, I'll shoot him. No hesitation.
He pulled out a revolver, loaded 2 chambers, and tucked it into his right pocket. During this time, we'd been following Toby through semi-rural streets lined with villas. But now we were entering continuous rows of city streets. Laborers and dock workers were up. Women were sweeping steps and removing shutters. Pubs were opening, and rough men came out wiping their beards. Stray dogs watched us with mild interest, but Toby didn't look left or right, just kept trotting along, nose to the ground, occasionally whining with excitement. We passed through Streatham, Brixton, Camberwell, and now we're in Kennington Lane, having veered east of the Oval. The men we pursued had clearly taken a zigzag route, probably to avoid attention. They avoided main roads when side streets could serve instead. At the bottom of Kennington Lane, they slipped into Bond Street, then Miles Street. At the bend into Knight's Place, Toby suddenly stopped. He ran back and forth, ears twitching, clearly confused. He circled around, looking at us like he wanted help.
What the deuce is wrong with the dog? They didn't take a cab or a balloon, surely.
Maybe they lingered here for a while.
Ah, he's back on it.
And so he was. After another sniff, Toby seemed to decide on a path and surged forward with new energy. The scent must have been fresher. He didn't even need to lower his nose. He strained at the leash, eager to run. Holmes's eyes lit up. We both knew we were closing in. We followed Toby down 9 Elms, arriving at Broderick and Nelson's large timber yard, just past the White Eagle Tavern. The dog, now frantic, darted through the side gate and into the busy yard where sawyers were already at work. He sped through sawdust, around a passage, between wood piles, then suddenly leapt with triumph onto a large barrel standing on a hand trolley. His tongue lolled, eyes blinked, and he stood proudly on the barrel, waiting for praise. The staves and trolley wheels were stained with dark liquid, and the entire yard reeked of creosote. Holmes and I exchanged blank stares, then burst into uncontrollable laughter. "What now?" I asked, feeling a bit disheartened. "Toby's reputation for infallibility has taken a hit."
He did his best,
he replied, gently lifting Toby down from the barrel and leading him out of the timber yard.
Think about how much creosote is moved through London in a single day. It's no surprise our trail got crossed. It's widely used, especially for treating wood. Poor Toby isn't at fault.
I suppose we need to get back to the original trail.
Yes, and luckily, we don't have far to go. Toby got confused at the corner of Knight's Place because there were 2 trails going in opposite directions. We simply followed the wrong one. All we have to do now is try the other.
There wasn't any difficulty. Once we brought Toby back to the spot where he'd made the error, he sniffed around in a wide circle and then suddenly took off in a new direction. We should be careful he doesn't just lead us to where the creosote barrel came from.
I've considered that. But notice, he's staying on the sidewalk, whereas the barrel would have been dragged down the road. No, this is the right trail.
The trail led toward the riverside, passing through Belmont Place and Princess Street. At the end of Broad Street, it reached the edge of the water, where there was a small wooden wharf. Toby stopped right at the edge, whining softly as he stared out at the dark, flowing current.
Seems we're out of luck. They boarded a boat here.
Several small punts and skiffs were floating nearby or pulled up onto the wharf. We took Toby to each one, but although he sniffed carefully, he didn't react. Near the rough landing stage stood a small brick house. A wooden sign hung from the second-story window, bearing the name Mordecai Smith, with the words "Boats to hire by the hour or day" beneath it. Above the front door, another sign said a steam launch was available, a claim supported by a large pile of coke sitting on the jetty. Holmes slowly surveyed the area, and a shadow crossed his face.
This isn't good. These men are more clever than I gave them credit for. Looks like they've planned this well and hidden their tracks.
Just as he moved toward the door, it swung open. A curly-haired boy of about 6 came running out, chased by a plump, red-faced woman holding a sponge. The woman shouted at the boy to come back and get cleaned up, warning him that his father wouldn't be pleased to see him in such a state.
Charming little fellow. Such rosy cheeks. Tell me, Jack, is there something you'd like?
The boy thought for a moment before answering that he'd like a shilling.
Nothing better than that?
After another pause, the boy admitted that 2 shillings would be better.
Here you go, Ketch. A fine child, Mrs. Smith.
The woman beamed with pride and confessed the boy was a handful, especially with her husband being away for days at a time.
Away, is he? That's unfortunate. I hope to speak with Mr. Smith.
She explained that he'd been gone since the previous morning, and she was starting to feel uneasy. If it was about a boat, perhaps she could help.
I was hoping to hire his steam launch.
The woman told him that Smith had actually taken the steam launch when he left. That puzzled her, since there weren't enough coals on board to take the boat farther than Woolwich and back. If it had been the barge, she wouldn't have worried. Sometimes Smith went as far as Gravesend for work. But a steam launch without enough coal didn't make sense.
Maybe he bought more coal downriver.
She doubted that. He often complained about the prices. What truly bothered her was the wooden-legged man with the odd face and strange accent who kept showing up. It was him who woke up her husband the night before, and it seemed like they had arranged it ahead of time. Smith already had steam up in the launch.
A wooden-legged man.
She confirmed it was a brown, monkey-faced fellow who had come looking for her husband multiple times. She had recognized his voice when he knocked on the window around 3 in the morning. He shouted something like, "Show a leg, matey, time to turn out guard." And her husband got up, woke their eldest son Jim, and left without saying a word. She could hear the wooden leg tapping against the stones. Holmes asked if the wooden-legged man had been alone, but she couldn't be sure. She hadn't heard anyone else.
I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Smith. I really needed a steam launch. What's the name of his boat again?
She told him it was the Aurora, not the old green one with a yellow stripe, but a freshly painted black launch with 2 red stripes.
Thanks. I hope you hear from Mr. Smith soon. I'm heading downriver. If I spot the Aurora, I'll be sure to let him know you're worried. The funnel is black, right?
She clarified it was black with a white band, and Holmes thanked her again before walking away.
There's a boatman over there with a wherry, Watson. Let's take it and cross the river.
As we sat in the little boat, Holmes leaned closer and spoke in a low voice.
The key with people like that is never to let them think they're telling you something important. If you do, they'll clam up. But if you act indifferent, they often say more than they intend.
Our course now seems pretty clear.
What would you do then?
I'd hire a launch and follow the trail of the Aurora down the river.
My dear fellow, that would be an enormous task. She could have stopped at any wharf on either side of the Thames, all the way down to Greenwich. Below the bridge, there's a maze of landing places stretching for miles. It would take you days, maybe more, if you tried it alone.
Then bring in the police.
No, I may call Athelney Jones in at the last minute. He's not a bad fellow, and I don't want to damage his career. But I'd prefer to solve this on my own now that we've come this far.
What about advertising? We could ask the wharf keepers for information.
Even worse, our targets would realize we're onto them and flee the country. They're likely to run anyway, but if they think they're safe, they'll stay put a little longer. That's where Jones can help. His version of the case is sure to get published, and it'll lead the fugitives to believe everyone's chasing the wrong trail.
What should we do then? I asked as we stepped off near Millbank Penitentiary.
Let's grab this handsome cab, go home, have breakfast, and sleep for an hour. We might need to head back out tonight. Cabby, stop at the telegraph office on the way. We'll keep Toby. He might still come in handy.
We pulled up at the Great Peter Street post office, and Holmes sent a telegram.
Guess who that was for?
He asked as we got moving again. I said, I have no idea.
You remember the Baker Street division of my unofficial detective force, the ones I used during the Jefferson Hope case?
Of course.
This is exactly the kind of case they're useful for. If they fail, I have backup plans, but they're my first choice. That telegram was to Wiggins, my scruffy little lieutenant. I expect he and his crew will show up before we're done with breakfast.
By this time, it was between 8 and 9 o'clock. The adrenaline from the night's events had worn off, and I felt utterly drained, mentally foggy, and physically exhausted. Unlike Holmes, I didn't see this as just an intellectual puzzle. As for Bartholomew Sholto's death, I hadn't heard anything positive about him and didn't feel much sympathy. But the treasure, that was something else. Part of it rightfully belonged to Miss Morstan. As long as there was hope of recovering it, I was committed to doing everything possible. True, finding it might put her forever out of reach, but love that hinges on selfish gain is no love at all. If Holmes could chase down the killers, I had 10 times more reason to pursue the treasure. After a bath and fresh clothes at Baker Street, I felt like a new man. When I came downstairs, breakfast was set, and Holmes was pouring coffee.
Here it is,
He said, pointing to a newspaper.
The tireless Jones and his ever-present reporter have done it again. But you've had enough of the case. Eat your ham and eggs first.
I took the paper and read a short notice titled, Mysterious Business at Upper Norwood. According to the Standard, around midnight, Mr. Bartholomew Sholto of Pondicherry Lodge, Upper Norwood, was found dead under suspicious circumstances. No visible injuries were noted, but a valuable collection of Indian gems, inherited from his father, had vanished. The discovery was made by Sherlock Holmes and me, accompanied by Mr. Thaddeus Sholto, the deceased brother. By a stroke of luck, Inspector Athelney Jones had been at the Norwood police station and arrived within half an hour. Using his experienced faculties, he arrested Thaddeus Sholto, the housekeeper Mrs. Burnstone, an Indian butler named Lal Rao, and the gatekeeper, McMurdo. Jones had deduced that the thieves must have entered through the roof via a trapdoor, not through the door or windows. Proof this wasn't a random burglary. The article praised the quick and decisive action of the police, calling for more decentralization of detectives so they could stay closer to the action.
Isn't it glorious? What do you think?
I think we came dangerously close to being arrested ourselves.
So do I. If Jones has one more burst of enthusiasm, we might still end up in trouble.
Just then, the doorbell rang loudly. We heard Mrs. Hudson protesting in a distressed voice. By heaven, Holmes, I think they really are here for us.
No, not quite. That's the unofficial force, the Baker Street Irregulars.
There was a sudden clatter of bare feet on the stairs and a chorus of high-pitched voices. A dozen dirty, Ragged Street kids burst into the room. Despite the chaotic entrance, they quickly lined up in front of us with eager expressions. One of them, taller and older than the rest, stepped forward with a laid-back swagger. His confident air was almost comical given his ragged appearance. He mentioned that the train tickets had cost 3 shillings and 6 in total.
Here you are.
Holmes said, handing him some silver coins.
From now on, Wiggins, they report to you, and you report to me. I can't have my house overrun like this again. Still, it's just as well that all of you are here now. Listen carefully. I need to locate a steam launch called the Aurora, owned by Mordecai Smith. It's black with 2 red stripes and a funnel that's black with a white band. She's somewhere downriver. One of you should stay at Mordecai Smith's landing stage. just across from Millbank, in case the boat returns. Divide yourselves up and search both sides of the river thoroughly. Report back the moment you hear anything. Got it?
Wiggins responded smartly, confirming that he understood Holmes's instructions.
Same pay scale as before, and a full guinea to the boy who finds the boat. Here's a day's advance.
He handed each of them a shilling, and off they flew down the stairs. A moment later, I saw them rushing down the street in a wild flurry of motion.
If the boat's still afloat, they'll find her.
Holmes said, standing from the table and lighting his pipe.
They can go anywhere, notice everything, and overhear anything. I expect word from them before evening. Until then, there's nothing more we can do. We're stuck until either the Aurora or Mordecai Smith turns up again.
Toby could probably finish these scraps. Are you going to bed, Holmes?
No, I'm not tired. I have a peculiar constitution. I never feel exhausted from work, but doing nothing drains me completely. I'm going to smoke and think over this strange case our charming client has drawn us into. Honestly, this should be an easy one. Wooden-legged men aren't exactly common, and that other man must be completely unique.
That other man again?
I'm not trying to be mysterious with you, but surely you've come to your own conclusion. Think about the clues. Tiny footprints, clearly barefoot, a stone-headed wooden club, extreme agility, small poison darts. What does that suggest to you?
A savage. Maybe one of the Indians who were Jonathan Small's accomplices?
Not likely. At first, the unusual weapons led me in that direction, but the footprints made me reconsider. Some Indian tribes have small statures, yes, but none have feet like that. Hindus typically have long, narrow feet. Mohammedans wear sandals, so their big toes are more spread out due to the thong. And those little darts? They could only be fired from a blowpipe. So where do we find people like that?
South America? Holmes reached up and pulled a large volume from the shelf.
This is the first volume of a new gazetteer, up-to-date geographical data. Let's see. Andaman Islands, 340 miles north of Sumatra in the Bay of Bengal. Moist climate, coral reefs, sharks, Port Blair, convict barracks, Rutland Island, cottonwoods. Here we go. The Aborigines of the Andaman Islands may be the smallest race on Earth, though some anthropologists argue in favor of the Bushmen of Africa, the Digger Indians of America, or the Tierra del Fuegians. Their average height is under 4 feet, and many full-grown adults are even smaller. They are fierce, morose, and wild, yet capable of deep loyalty if trust is earned. Did you catch that, Watson? Now listen. They are naturally hideous, large, deformed heads, small fierce eyes, twisted features, but their hands and feet are remarkably tiny. They're so savage and resistant that British officials have never managed to tame or educate them. They're infamous for attacking shipwreck survivors, beating them with clubs or shooting poison darts, and finishing with cannibal feasts. Charming folks, aren't they? If this man had been left to his own devices, things might have turned out even worse. I'd bet Jonathan Small now regrets ever bringing him into this.
But how did he end up with such a bizarre companion?
That's more than I can say for now. But since we already know Small came from the Andamans, it's not too surprising one of them came with him. We'll probably get the full story in time. But look at you, Watson. You're dead on your feet. Lie down on the sofa, and I'll see if I can lull you to sleep.
He picked up his violin from the corner, and as I lay back, he began to play a soft, dreamy melody, surely something he made up himself, as he often did. I have a faint memory of his long limbs, his intense face, and the gentle rise and fall of the bow. Then I seemed to drift away on a tide of peaceful sound, until I found myself in dreamland, with the sweet face of Mary Morstan looking down at me. It was late in the afternoon when I finally woke, feeling restored and refreshed. Holmes was still in the same spot, though his violin was now resting to the side and he was buried in a book. As I stirred, he glanced at me, his face dark and tense.
You've had a good sleep. I was afraid our conversation might disturb you.
I didn't hear a thing. Any news while I slept?
Sadly, no. I must admit, I'm both surprised and disappointed. By now, I had expected some progress. Wiggins stopped by a short while ago. Still no trace of the launch. It's a frustrating setback, especially when every hour counts.
Is there anything I can do? I'm fully rested and ready for another night's search.
There's nothing to be done. We have to wait. If we leave now, we might miss a message. You're free to go where you like, but I need to stay on alert.
In that case, I think I'll visit Mrs. Cecil Forrester in Camberwell. She invited me yesterday.
Mrs. Cecil Forrester?
Well, Miss Morstan too, naturally. They're eager for an update.
I wouldn't tell them too much. You know, women aren't always to be trusted, not even the best of them.
I didn't argue with his rather offensive view. I simply told him I'd return in a couple of hours.
All right. Good luck. Oh, and if you're crossing the river, you might as well return Toby. I doubt we'll be needing him now.
So I took our faithful mongrel and dropped him off, along with a half-sovereign, at the old naturalist place in Pinchin Lane. At Camberwell, I found Miss Morstan a bit tired after the previous night's ordeal, but very eager to hear the latest. Mrs. Forrester was full of curiosity as well. I told them what had happened, leaving out the more disturbing parts of the case. Though I mentioned Mr. Sholto's death, I said nothing about its strange and horrifying circumstances. Still, even with my omissions, they were deeply shocked and amazed. Mrs. Forrester exclaimed that the whole story felt like a real-life fairy tale. An injured woman, a fortune and treasure, a savage from a distant land, and a villain with a wooden leg. She joked that they had replaced the classic dragon and wicked nobleman. Miss Morstan smiled brightly and added that there were even 2 knights-errant involved in the rescue. Mrs. Forrester reminded her how life-changing this discovery could be, how exciting it must feel to have such wealth within reach. It warmed me to see that Miss Morstan showed no sign of greed or excitement. Instead, she raised her head proudly, clearly unmoved by the idea of sudden riches. She said her concern was for Thaddeus Sholto. Nothing else mattered to her, and she believed he had acted honorably throughout. She was determined to help clear his name from the unfair accusations. It was already evening when I left Camberwell, and quite dark by the time I arrived home. Holmes's book and pipe lay beside his chair, but he was nowhere to be seen. I looked around, hoping for a note, but found none. I suppose Mr. Holmes has gone out, I said to Mrs. Hudson as she came in to draw the blinds. In a hushed, uneasy tone, she said that Holmes hadn't left the house. He had gone to his room. She seemed worried for his health. She described how he had paced the floor endlessly after I'd left, muttering to himself, reacting sharply to every sound of the bell, and eventually retreating to his room. She even tried to suggest he take some medicine, but it glared at her so intensely, she fled the room in alarm. I don't think you need to worry, Mrs. Hudson, I told her gently. I've seen him like this before. He's probably just restless with some detail of the case bothering him. Though I tried to calm her, I couldn't shake my own sense of unease. Throughout the night, I kept hearing his steady footsteps above, proof that his brilliant mind was still grinding against the walls of inaction. By breakfast, Holmes looked pale and exhausted, with a faint feverish flush coloring his cheeks. You're wearing yourself out, old friend. I heard you pacing the floor last night.
No, I couldn't sleep. This damn puzzle is eating away at me. To have come so far and now be blocked by such a trivial detail, it's maddening. I know who the men are. I know the launch, everything, and yet there's no word. I've activated all possible contacts, exhausted every method. The river's been searched from bank to bank, but still nothing. Not even Mrs. Smith has heard from her husband. I'm starting to think they may have sunk the launch, though even that has its flaws.
Or perhaps Mrs. Smith deliberately sent us in the wrong direction.
No, I've already ruled that out. I had inquiries made. There's indeed a launch matching that description.
Is it possible they went upriver instead?
I've thought of that too. There's a team searching as far up as Richmond. If we still hear nothing today, I'll go after the men myself rather than the boat. But surely we'll hear something soon.
We didn't. Not a single word came from Wiggins or the others we'd engaged. Most newspapers had articles on the Norwood case, and the tone was generally unfavorable toward poor Thaddeus Sholto. Still, none of them provided any new insight, just that an inquest was scheduled for the next day. That evening, I walked to Camberwell to inform the ladies of our lack of progress. When I returned, Holmes looked gloomy and withdrawn. He barely acknowledged my questions and spent the entire evening absorbed in a complex chemical experiment. The process required heating glass flasks and distilling vapors, and by the time he was done, the smell had grown so intolerable that I had to leave the room. I could still hear the clinking of glassware into the early morning hours. Just after dawn, I woke with a jolt to find Holmes standing beside my bed. He was dressed like a sailor, peacoat, coarse red scarf, and all.
I'm heading down the river, Watson. I've been thinking it over, and there's just one avenue left to explore. It's worth a shot.
Then let me come with you.
No, you can help me more by staying here as my representative. I hate to leave just in case something comes in. Wiggins was pretty discouraged last night, but we can't afford to miss any leads. I need you to open every note and telegram and respond according to your judgment. Can I count on you?
Absolutely.
I'm afraid I won't be able to receive wires myself. I've no idea where I might end up. But if I'm lucky, I won't be gone too long. I'll bring back news of some kind.
By breakfast, there was still no sign of him. While browsing the Standard, I found a new update on the case. It read, "With reference to the Upper Norwood tragedy, we have reason to believe the matter is even more complex and mysterious than previously thought. New evidence confirms that Mr. Thaddeus Sholto could not have been involved. Both he and the housekeeper, Mrs. Burnstone, were released last evening. However, it is believed that the police are now pursuing a significant clue under the expert direction of Mr. Athelney Jones of Scotland Yard. Further arrests may follow at any time." That was a bit of a relief. At least Thaddeus seemed to be in the clear. Still, I couldn't help wondering what this so-called clue might be. Knowing the police, it wouldn't surprise me if it turned out to be another one of their breakthroughs that came right after they'd bungled things. As I dropped the paper onto the table, my eye caught a notice in the agony column. It read, "Lost, whereas Mordecai Smith, boatman, and his son, Jim, left Smith's Wharf at or about 3 o'clock last Tuesday morning in the steam launch Aurora, black with 2 red stripes, funnel black with a white band. The sum of £5 will be paid to anyone who can give information to Mrs. Smith at Smith's Wharf or at 221B Baker Street as to the whereabouts of the said Mordecai Smith and the launch Aurora." It was clearly Holmes's handiwork. The Baker Street address confirmed that. I thought the idea quite clever. It might be seen by the fugitives, but would appear to be nothing more than a worried wife's plea for her missing husband. The day dragged on. Every knock at the door, every brisk footstep on the street, made me think Holmes had returned or that a response to his ad had arrived. I tried to read, but my mind wandered back to our unusual pursuit and to the dangerous pair we were hunting. Could Holmes be wrong? Was his mind playing tricks on him? Building a theory too delicate to hold? He had never been mistaken before, but even the sharpest minds can slip. Holmes's flaw, I suspected, was his tendency toward overly intricate reasoning, preferring a twisted theory over a simple one. Yet I had seen the same clues and heard the same deductions. Even if his theory was wrong, the real answer had to be equally bizarre. At 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang sharply. I heard a commanding voice in the hallway, and to my surprise, it was none other than Mr. Athelney Jones who entered. He was not the confident, assertive figure from Upper Norwood. Instead, he looked subdued and apologetic.
"Good day, sir. Good day. Mr. Sherlock Holmes is out, I take it?"
"Yes, and I'm not sure when he'll return, but perhaps you'd like to wait? Take that chair and try one of these cigars."
"Thank you. I don't mind if I do."
He wiped his face with a red handkerchief. I said, "How about a whiskey and soda?"
"Well, just half a glass. It's unseasonably hot, and I've had quite a bit on my plate. You remember my theory on the Norwood case?"
"I recall you had one."
"Well, I've had to rethink it. I had Sholto boxed in nice and tight, and then, boom, he slips through. He had an airtight alibi. From the moment he left his brother's room, he was constantly in someone's view. No way it was him scaling roofs and sneaking through trapdoors. It's a tough case, and my reputation's on the line. I'd be grateful for a little help.
We all need help sometimes.
Your friend Holmes is a remarkable man. I've seen him handle many cases, and he always finds a way to shine a light where none seems possible. His methods may be unconventional, and he's quick to form theories, but he'd have made a fine officer. I don't care who hears me say it. He sent me a wire this morning. Seems he's on to something.
He pulled a telegram from his pocket and handed it to me. It was sent from Poplar at noon and read, "Go to Baker Street at once. If I have not returned, wait for me. I am close on the track of the Sholto gang. You can come with us tonight if you want to be in at the finish." I said, "That sounds promising." He must have picked up the trail again.
So he was thrown off after all. Even the best of us are. It might still be a false lead, but as an officer of the law, I can't afford to ignore it. Wait, someone's at the door. Perhaps it's him.
Heavy steps climbed the stairs. Whoever was wheezed and rattled with effort. Twice he stopped, as if the climb was too much. Finally, the door opened, and in stepped an elderly man in seaman's clothes. He wore an old pea jacket buttoned to the chin. His back was stooped, knees unsteady, and his breathing harsh and labored. Leaning on a thick wooden cane, his shoulders rose and fell with each breath. A scarf wrapped around his chin, and under his bushy white brows, sharp dark eyes peeked out. Long gray whiskers framed his weathered face. He looked like a retired sea captain fallen on hard times. I asked, "What is it, my man?" He looked about him in the slow, methodical fashion of old age.
Is Mr. Sherlock Holmes here?
"No, but I'm acting on his behalf. You can tell me your message."
I was told to speak to him directly.
I said I'm acting for him. "Is this about Mordecai Smith's boat?"
Yes. I knows where it is. And I knows where the men he's chasing are. I even knows where the treasure is. I knows the whole thing.
"Then tell me, and I'll inform Mr. Holmes."
I was told to tell him, not you.
"Then you'll have to wait."
No. I'm not wasting a whole day for nobody. If Holmes ain't here, then he can find out on his own. I don't like the looks of either of you, and I won't say another word.
He shuffled toward the door, but Athelney Jones blocked his path.
Hold on, friend. You've got important information. You're not leaving until our friend returns.
The old man made a half-hearted lunge for the door, but seeing Jones's large frame blocking the way, he realized it was pointless.
This is no way to treat a man. I came here to see a gentleman, and now I'm being held by two strangers I don't even know.
You'll be none the worse for it. We'll make it worth your while. Come, sit here on the sofa. You won't have to wait long. The old man came over reluctantly and sat down, his face buried in his hands. Jones and I lit fresh cigars and resumed our conversation, until Holmes's voice suddenly cut in.
"I think you gentlemen might offer me a cigar too."
We both jumped in our seats. There was Holmes, sitting calmly right next to us, with a look of quiet amusement. I exclaimed, "Holmes, you're here? But where's the old man?"
"Right here."
He said, holding up a bundle of white hair.
"Wig, whiskers, eyebrows, all included. I thought the disguise held up rather well, though I didn't expect it to fool you both completely."
You rascal. You could have been an actor, a brilliant one. That cough alone was straight out of the workhouse, and those shaky legs of yours could earn 10 pounds a week. But I did notice something in your eyes. You nearly had me, but not quite.
"I've been in disguise all day. You see, many of the criminal crowd are starting to recognize me, especially since our friend here started writing about my work. So I have to go undercover now and then. Did you get my telegram?"
Yes, and that's what brought me here.
"How's your case going?"
It's gone nowhere. I had to release 2 of the prisoners, and there's no solid evidence against the others.
"No matter. We'll give you 2 new ones instead, but you'll need to follow my lead. You can have all the official credit, but you must work the case my way. Do we have a deal?"
Absolutely, if it gets me the men.
"First, I'll need a fast police boat, a steam launch, waiting at Westminster Stairs by 7.
Easily done. There's usually one nearby, but I'll call to confirm.
I'll also need 2 reliable officers in case things get rough.
There'll be 2 or 3 in the boat. What else?
When we catch the man, we'll also recover the treasure. I think it would mean a lot to my friend here to personally deliver the box to the young lady who's entitled to half. Let her be the first to open it. What do you say, Watson?
It will be a great pleasure to me.
Bit irregular, but the whole case is irregular, so I guess we can look the other way. Of course, the treasure must be handed over to the authorities for official review.
Of course. That's easily arranged. One last thing. I'd like to hear Jonathan Small's account directly. I always prefer to fill in the final details myself. Is there any objection to an informal interview with him, here or elsewhere, as long as he's properly guarded?
Well, you're in control here. I haven't even had proof that this Jonathan Small exists, but if you catch him, I won't deny you the interview.
Then we're all set.
Perfectly. Anything else?
Only that I insist you dine with us. Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. Oysters, a brace of grouse, and a rather refined bottle of white. Watson, you've never fully appreciated my housekeeping talents.
Our dinner was cheerful and lively. Holmes, when he chose to talk, could be remarkably engaging, and that night he certainly chose. He seemed to be in a state of nervous excitement, unlike anything I had ever seen. He spoke on one topic after another: miracle plays, medieval pottery, Stradivarius violins, the Buddhism of Ceylon, and the future of warships, handling each subject as if it were his specialty. His radiant humor stood in stark contrast to the gloom he had displayed over the past few days. Athelney Jones, too, proved to be quite sociable when relaxed. He enjoyed his meal like a true connoisseur. As for me, I was elated by the thought that we were closing in on our goal, and Holmes's enthusiasm was infectious. None of us mentioned the case that had brought us together. After the table was cleared, Holmes checked his watch and poured 3 glasses of port.
A toast to the success of tonight's little expedition. And now, it's high time we were off. Watson, do you have your pistol?
My old service revolver is in my desk.
You'd better take it. Best to be prepared. Well, the cab is already at the door. I had it ordered for 6:30.
It was a bit after 7 when we reached Westminster Wharf, where our launch was waiting. Holmes examined it carefully.
Is there anything that marks this as a police boat?
Yes, the green lamp on the side.
Take it off.
They removed the lamp, and we boarded. The ropes were cast off. Holmes, Jones, and I sat at the stern. One man was at the rudder, another tended the engine, and 2 burly police inspectors stood at the front.
Where to?
To the tower. Have them stop opposite Jacobson's yard.
The boat was remarkably fast. We zipped past rows of loaded barges as though they were anchored. Holmes grinned in satisfaction when we overtook a river steamer and left it behind.
We should be able to catch anything on this river.
Well, maybe not anything, but few launches could beat this one.
We'll need to catch the Aurora, and she has a reputation for speed. Let me explain where things stand. Watson, do you remember how frustrated I was by being blocked by such a small thing?
Yes.
Well, I cleared my mind by diving into a chemical experiment. A great statesman once said that a change of work is the best form of rest, and I agree. Once I'd finished dissolving the hydrocarbon I was working on, I came back to the Sholto case with fresh perspective. My boys had searched up and down the river without result. The Aurora hadn't shown up at any dock, nor had it returned to Smith's Wharf. It was unlikely they'd scuttled it, but I kept that as a fallback theory. Now, I knew Jonathan Small had some low-level cunning, but I doubted he had any refined strategy. It usually takes more education for that. Given that he had been watching Pondicherry Lodge for a while, it seemed unlikely he would flee without some preparation. He'd probably take at least a day to get things in order. That was the most logical assumption.
It sounded a bit weak to me. More likely he had prepared everything before setting out.
Possibly, but I doubt it. That hideout would be too valuable to abandon until he was certain he no longer needed it. Then another thought hit me. Small had to realize that the appearance of his companion, even in disguise, would cause gossip, possibly linking them to the Norwood murder. They started at night and would want to return before sunrise. Mrs. Smith said they left with the boat around 3 o'clock. By 4 or 5, the city would be waking up, so I deduced they couldn't have gone far. They paid Smith generously to keep quiet, reserved the Aurora for escape, and took the treasure to their hideout. They'd wait a couple of days, see how the newspapers reacted, and then try to escape to America or the colonies via ship at Gravesend or in the Downs, likely arranged in advance.
But what about the launch? They couldn't have taken it to their lodgings.
Exactly. That led me to believe the Aurora wasn't far off. I imagined what I'd do in his shoes. I wouldn't leave the boat at a dock. That would make it too easy for the police to track. Instead, I'd send it to a boat repair yard with a trivial request, something like a rudder adjustment. That would hide it, but still keep it within reach. So, dressed as a sailor, I went yard to yard asking questions. 15 times I got nothing. But at the 16th, Jacobson's yard, I hit gold. The Aurora had been brought in 2 days ago by a man with a wooden leg, asking for minor rudder work. The foreman said, "There's nothing wrong with her rudder, but there she lies, with red stripes on her side." Just then, Mordecai Smith himself showed up, drunk and loud. I wouldn't have known him, but he shouted his name and the launch's name. "I want her at 8 o'clock tonight sharp. I've got 2 gentlemen who won't be kept waiting," he bellowed. Clearly, they'd paid him well. He was throwing money around like confetti. I followed him briefly, but he disappeared into a pub. On my way back to the yard, I picked up one of my Baker Street boys and stationed him by the river. His job is to wave a handkerchief when the launch departs. We'll be waiting in the stream, and unless fate intervenes, we'll capture the men, the treasure, and everything in between.
You've planned everything quite neatly, even if these aren't the right men. But if I were in charge, I would have posted police at Jacobson's yard and arrested them when they came.
That would have led nowhere. Small is a sharp fellow. He would have sent a scout ahead, and if anything had seemed off, he'd have hidden away for another week.
But couldn't you have simply followed Mordecai Smith to their hideout?
And wasted my entire day. I bet 100 to 1 Smith doesn't know their address. As long as he gets his pay and his liquor, he won't ask questions. They simply send him instructions. I went over every possible option. This is the best.
While we talked, our boat sped beneath the many bridges of the Thames. As we passed the city, the last rays of sunlight glinted off the cross atop St. Paul's Cathedral. Twilight had fallen by the time we reached the tower.
"There's Jacobson's yard,"
he said, pointing toward a tangle of masts and rigging on the Surrey side.
"Let's cruise slowly up and down behind that string of lighters."
He pulled out a pair of night glasses and scanned the shoreline.
"My sentry is at his post, but no signal yet."
Let's head a bit downstream and wait for them there.
By now, all of us, including the policemen and stokers, who barely knew what was going on, were brimming with anticipation.
We can't assume anything. True, odds favor them heading downstream, but we can't be sure. From here we can watch the yard entrance, but they won't spot us. It's a clear night with ample moonlight. We stay put. Look at the workers pouring out under the gaslights.
They're just finishing work for the day.
Rough-looking fellows, but each one has some spark of humanity hidden in him. You wouldn't guess it at a glance. Man is such a strange riddle.
Someone calls him a soul concealed in an animal.
Winwood Reade has good thoughts on that. He wrote that while individual humans are unsolvable puzzles, collectively they become predictable, almost mathematical. You can't predict what one person might do, but you can accurately forecast what 100 will. Individuals differ, but percentages hold. So says the statistician. But wait, do I see a signal? That's a handkerchief fluttering.
Yes, it's your boy. I can see him clearly.
And there's the Aurora. She's moving fast, full speed, engineer. Chase that launch with the yellow lamp. I'll never forgive myself if she outruns us.
The Aurora had slipped out of the yard, hidden behind a few small vessels, and gained considerable speed before we saw her. Now she raced along the shoreline at breakneck speed. Jones studied her grimly and shook his head.
She's extremely fast. I doubt we'll catch her.
We must catch her. Stokers, give her everything you've got. Even if we burn this boat, we must not lose them.
And so the chase began. The furnace roared, and our powerful engine thumped like a giant mechanical heart. The sharp bow sliced the water, sending waves crashing to either side. Each piston thrust shot us forward like a living creature. A large yellow lantern at the bow lit our path in flickering light. Ahead, a dark blur marked the Aurora, and the churned white foam behind her showed her incredible speed. We sped past barges and steamers, weaving between massive merchant ships. Voices hailed us from the darkness, but we didn't stop. The Aurora kept thundering ahead, and so did we.
Pilot on, man. Everything you've got.
He said, peering into the engine room, the firelight casting wild shadows across his eager, hawk-like face.
Give me every last pound of steam.
Jones kept his eyes fixed ahead.
I think we're gaining on her.
I'm sure of it. We shall be up with her in a very few minutes. At that moment, however, as our evil fate would have it, a tug with 3 barges in tow blundered in between us. It was only by putting our helm hard down that we avoided a collision, and before we could round them and recover our way, the Aurora had gained a good 200 yards. She was still, however, well in view, and the murky, uncertain twilight was setting into a clear, starlit night. Our boilers were strained to their utmost, and the frail shell vibrated and creaked with the fierce energy which was driving us along. We had shot through the pool, past the West India docks, down the long Deptford Reach, and up again after rounding the Isle of Dogs. The dull blur in front of us resolved itself, now clearly enough, into the dainty Aurora. Jones turned our searchlight upon her, so that we could plainly see the figures upon her deck. One man sat by the stern, with something black between his knees over which he stooped. Beside him lay a dark mass which looked like a Newfoundland dog. The boy held the tiller, while against the red glare of the furnace I could see old Smith, stripped to the waist, and shoveling coals for dear life. They may have had some doubt at first as to whether we were really pursuing them, but now as we followed every winding and turning which they took, there could no longer be any question about it. At Greenwich we were about 300 paces behind them. At Blackwall we could not have been more than 250. I have coursed many creatures in many countries during my checkered career, but never did sport give me such a wild thrill as this mad, flying manhunt down the Thames. Steadily we drew in upon them, yard by yard. In the silence of the night, we could hear the panting and clanking of their machinery. The man in the stern still crouched upon the deck, and his arms were moving as though he were busy, while every now and then he would look up and measure with a glance the distance which still separated us. Nearer we came and nearer. Jones yelled to them to stop. We were not more than 4 boats' lengths behind them, both boats flying at a tremendous pace. It was a clear reach of the river, with barking level upon one side and the melancholy Plumstead marshes upon the other. At our hail the man in the stern sprang up from the deck and shook his 2 clenched fists at us, cursing the while in a high, cracked voice. He was a good-sized, powerful man, and as he stood poising himself with legs astride, I could see that from the thigh downwards there was but a wooden stump upon the right side. At the sound of his strident, angry cries there was movement in the huddled bundle upon the deck. It straightened itself into a little black man, the smallest I have ever seen, with a great, misshapen head and a shock of tangled, disheveled hair. Holmes had already drawn his revolver, and I whipped out mine at the sight of this savage, distorted creature. He was wrapped in some sort of dark ulster or blanket, which left only his face exposed, but that face was enough to give a man a sleepless night. Never have I seen features so deeply marked with all bestiality and cruelty. His small eyes glowed and burned with a somber light, and his thick lips were writhed back from his teeth, which grinned and chattered at us with a half-animal fury.
Fire if he raises his hand,
said Holmes, quietly. We were within a boat's length by this time, and almost within touch of our quarry. I can see the 2 of them now as they stood, the white man with his legs far apart, shrieking out curses, and the unhallowed dwarf with his hideous face and his strong yellow teeth gnashing at us in the light of our lantern. It was well that we had so clear a view of him. Even as we looked, he plucked out from under his covering a short, round piece of wood, like a school ruler, and clapped it to his lips. Our pistols rang out together. He whirled around, threw up his arms, and with a kind of choking cough, fell sideways into the stream. I caught one glimpse of his venomous, menacing eyes amid the white swirl of the waters. At the same moment, the wooden-legged man threw himself upon the rudder and put it hard down, so that his boat made straight in for the southern bank, while we shot past her stern, only clearing her by a few feet. We were round after her in an instant, but she was already nearly at the bank. It was a wild and desolate place, where the moon glimmered upon a wide expanse of marshland, with pools of stagnant water and beds of decaying vegetation. The launch with a dull thud ran up upon the mud bank, with her bow in the air and her stern flush with the water. The fugitive sprang out, but his stump instantly sank its whole length into the sodden soil. In vain he struggled and writhed. Not one step could he possibly take either forwards or backwards. He yelled in impotent rage and kicked frantically into the mud with his other foot, but his struggles only bored his wooden pin the deeper into the sticky bank. When we brought our launch alongside, he was anchored so firmly we couldn't pull him free. Only by throwing a rope over his shoulders were we able to haul him out, dragging him over the side like some evil fish. The two Smiths, father and son, sat sullenly in their launch, but came aboard meekly enough when commanded. The Aurora herself we hauled off and made fast to our stern. A solid iron chest of Indian workmanship stood upon the deck. This, there could be no question, was the same that had contained the ill-omened treasure of the Sholtos. There was no key, but it was of considerable weight, so we transferred it carefully to our own little cabin. As we steamed slowly upstream again, we flashed our searchlight in every direction, but there was no sign of the islander. Somewhere in the dark ooze at the bottom of the Thames lie the bones of that strange visitor to our shores.
"See here,"
said Holmes, pointing to the wooden hatchway.
"We were hardly quick enough with our pistols."
There, sure enough, just behind where we had been standing, stuck one of those murderous darts which we knew so well. It must have whizzed between us at the instant that we fired. Holmes smiled at it and shrugged his shoulders in his easy fashion, but I confess that it turned me sick to think of the horrible death which had passed so close to us that night. Our captive sat quietly in the cabin, directly across from the iron box he had worked so hard and waited so long to get his hands on. He was a sunburned man with sharp, reckless eyes and deep lines and wrinkles etched across his dark, weather-worn face. Clear signs of a hard life spent outdoors. A distinct, prominent chin covered in beard suggested a stubbornness that couldn't be easily shaken. He looked to be about 50, his thick, curly black hair streaked heavily with gray. Though his expression in rest wasn't unpleasant, the weight of his brows and his aggressive chin had, as I had recently seen, the potential for a terrifying look when angered. Now, sitting with his cuffed hands on his lap and his head bowed to his chest, he stared with sharp, glinting eyes at the box, the source of all his troubles. There seemed more sadness than rage in his rigid and controlled face. Once, he glanced up at me with a flicker of something like humor in his gaze.
"Well, Jonathan Small, I'm sorry things have come to this."
"And so am I, sir. I don't think I deserve the rope for this. I give you my word, sir, I never laid a hand on Mr. Sholto. That little hellhound, Tonga, fired one of those cursed darts into him. I had no part in it. I was as upset as if it had been my own brother. I gave that little devil a beating with the loose end of a rope afterward, but the deed was done, and there was no undoing it."
"Take a cigar, and maybe a drink from my flask. You're soaked, but honestly, how could you expect someone as small and weak as that black fellow to overpower Mr. Sholto and hold him while you climbed the rope?"
"You talk like you were there. Sir, truth is, I was hoping the room would be empty. I knew the house pretty well, and it was about the time Mr. Sholto usually went down for dinner. I won't hide anything now. The best defense I have is to tell the straight-up truth. Now, if it had been the old Major, I'd have killed him without blinking. I wouldn't have thought twice about stabbing him. As easy as puffing the cigar. But it's cursed unfair that I should be taking in over this younger Sholto, a man I had no problem with at all."
"You're in custody of Mr. Athelney Jones of Scotland Yard. He'll bring you up to my rooms, and I'll ask for the full story then. Be honest, and maybe I can help you. I think I can prove that the poison worked so fast. The man was dead before you even got into the room.
That's the truth, sir. I've never been so shaken in my life as when I saw him, grinning with his head lolling to the side, just as I climbed in through the window. It rattled me, sir. I would have half killed Tonga for it if he hadn't scrambled away. That's how he left behind his club, and a few of his darts too. So he tells me, which I guess helped lead you right to us, how you stayed on our trail. Though, that's beyond me. I'm not angry at you for it. But it sure feels strange, he added with a bitter smile, that a man with a rightful claim to nearly £500,000 should spend one half of his life building a breakwater in the Andamans and the other digging sewers at Dartmoor. My misfortune began the day I first met that merchant Achmet and got tangled up with the agri-treasure. It's never brought anything but a curse. It led to murder for him, fear and guilt for Major Sholto, and a lifetime of slavery for me.
At that moment, Athelney Jones shoved his broad face and heavy shoulders into the cramped cabin.
Quite the little family gathering. I think I'll take a sip from that flask. Holmes. Well, I suppose we can congratulate ourselves all around. Shame we couldn't take the other one alive, but we had no choice. I have to say, Holmes, you cut it pretty close. We only just managed to catch her.
All's well that ends well, but I must admit, I didn't know the Aurora was that fast.
Smith says she's one of the fastest launches on the river. If he'd had one more man to help with the engines, we'd have never caught up. He swears he knew nothing about the Norwood affair.
And he didn't. Not a single word. I picked his launch because I'd heard she was a flyer. We told him nothing, but paid him well. He was promised a good bonus if we made it to our ship, the Esmeralda, waiting at Gravesend and bound for Brazil.
Well, if he did no wrong, we'll make sure he's treated fairly. We might be quick to catch our criminals, but we don't rush to judge them.
It was amusing to notice how the consequential Jones was already beginning to give himself airs on the strength of the capture. From the slight smile which played over Sherlock Holmes's face, I could see that the speech had not been lost upon him.
We'll be at Vauxhall Bridge soon, and we'll drop you off there, Dr. Watson, with the treasure box. I don't need to tell you I'm taking on quite a responsibility here. It's highly irregular, but an agreement is an agreement. Still, as a formality, I must send an inspector with you since you'll be carrying such a valuable item. You'll be driving, I assume?
Yes, I'll be driving.
Too bad we don't have the key. We could take inventory first. You'll have to break it open. Where's the key, my man?
At the bottom of the river.
You didn't have to cause all this extra trouble. We've had quite enough work because of you already. Anyway, Doctor, I don't need to remind you to be careful. Bring the box back with you to the Baker Street rooms. You'll find us there on our way to the station.
They dropped me off at Vauxhall with the heavy iron box beside me, and the ever-genial inspector remained my companion. Within 15 minutes, we reached Mrs. Cecil Forrester's residence. The servant was clearly surprised by so late a visit, and informed me that Mrs. Forrester was out for the evening and not expected back anytime soon. However, Miss Morstan was in the drawing room, and so I made my way there, carrying the box, leaving the obliging inspector behind in the cab. She was seated by an open window, dressed in soft white fabric that shimmered gently in the lamplight. A subtle touch of scarlet at her neck and waist added contrast to her somber attire. The warm glow from a shaded lamp danced across her serene face and highlighted the golden tones in her coiled hair. One delicate arm rested idly off the side of her chair, her entire posture infused with quiet sorrow. But as soon as she heard my footsteps, she rose quickly, a gentle blush of surprise and delight brushing her cheeks. She told me she'd heard a cab and assumed Mrs. Forrester had returned, but hadn't imagined it might be me. She asked what news I brought. I responded with more cheer than I truly felt, placing the box on the table and pretending a jovial air. I said that I had something even greater than news, a fortune. Her gaze shifted to the box, and she calmly inquired if this was the treasure. I confirmed it was the famed Agra treasure, and told her half of it belonged to her, the other half to Thaddeus Sholto. I spoke of annuities and riches, of how few young women in England could match her fortune now. But I must have oversold my excitement, for she looked at me with faint curiosity, sensing the hollowness behind my words. She quietly remarked that if the treasure had been found, she owed it to me. I quickly corrected her, saying the credit belonged to Holmes. His analytical mind had done what I never could. In fact, we had nearly lost the whole thing at the very last moment. She invited me to sit and asked me to recount everything that had happened. I did so, briefly describing Holmes's methods, our discovery of the Aurora, the involvement of Athelney Jones, and the frantic chase down the Thames. She listened with wide eyes and parted lips, fully immersed in the tale. But when I reached the part about the poison dart that had nearly struck us, her face turned deathly pale, and I feared she might faint. I quickly poured her water, but she recovered fast, blaming herself for having unknowingly put us in such danger. I reassured her that it was all in the past, and nothing serious had come of it. Then, eager to lighten the moment, I turned our attention back to the treasure. I said I had brought it with me, so she could be the first to see it. She responded that it would certainly interest her, but her tone lacked enthusiasm. She likely felt that showing disinterest in something so hard-won might seem ungrateful. She bent over the box and admired its craftsmanship, remarking that it looked like Indian work. I confirmed it was Benares metal. She commented on how heavy it was and tried to lift it. Then she asked for the key. I told her Small had thrown it into the Thames and mentioned needing to borrow Mrs. Forster's poker. At the front of the box was a thick, broad hasp shaped like a sitting Buddha. I wedged the poker beneath it and applied pressure. With a sharp snap, the hasp sprang open. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid, and we both stared in utter disbelief. The box was completely empty. The weight, as it turned out, came only from the thickness of the iron itself, nearly 2/3 of an inch on all sides. Though solid and beautifully constructed to hold treasure, not a single jewel or coin remained inside. Miss Morstan spoke with calm certainty, stating that the treasure was gone. As her words settled in, I felt an immense weight lift from my soul. I hadn't realized just how heavily that golden prize had pressed upon me until it vanished. Selfishly, perhaps even wrongly, I felt only relief. The barrier it created between us had disappeared. In my heart, I thanked heaven. She looked at me, sensing something in my expression, and asked why I was so thankful. And that was the moment I revealed what had long remained unsaid, that I loved her, deeply and truly, and that it was only the existence of this treasure that had sealed my lips. With it gone, I was free to speak from the heart. She didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude herself, and as I held her close, I knew with certainty someone might have lost a treasure that night, but I had found one. The inspector waiting in the cab proved to be an unusually patient man, as I was gone for quite a long time before rejoining him. His expression darkened the moment I showed him the empty box. The inspector let out a heavy sigh, clearly disheartened. The absence of the treasure meant the promised reward was gone too. I could sense his disappointment. He and his partner, Sam Brown, had counted on earning a solid £10 each for their efforts that night. It had been grueling work, and the sudden vanishing of the prize hit them hard. Trying to lift his spirits, I reminded him that Thaddeus Sholto was a man of considerable means and unlikely to let such loyal service go unrewarded, treasure or not. But the inspector simply shook his head, still weighed down by the loss. He mumbled that it was a bad business all around, and hinted that Athelney Jones would likely share his sentiment. He wasn't wrong. When I returned to Baker Street and presented the empty box, the detective looked utterly dismayed. Holmes, Jones, and the prisoner had only just arrived themselves. They'd stopped at a nearby station to file a preliminary report. Holmes was lounging in his usual armchair with that relaxed, unreadable expression. Small sat across from him, wooden leg crossed over his good one, still and steady. As I held up the empty box, Small leaned back and laughed out loud.
This is your doing, Small.
Yes, I've hidden it away where you'll never lay a hand on it. It's my treasure, and if I can't enjoy the loot, I'll make damn sure no one else does either. No man alive has a right to it, except 3 others sitting in the convict barracks of the Andamans, and me. I've known for a while now that I'll never get to use it, and neither will they. But I've acted for them as much as for myself. It's always been a sign of four with us. I know they'd have wanted me to do exactly what I did. Dump that treasure in the Thames rather than let it fall into the hands of Sholto's or Morstan's kin. We didn't kill Achmet to make them rich. You'll find the treasure right where the key is and where Tonga lies. When I saw your launch was going to catch us, I made sure to stash it someplace safe. You won't be getting any rupees this trip.
You're trying to deceive us, Small. If you really wanted to dump the treasure, you could have thrown the whole box in.
Sure, easier for me to toss, and easier for you to recover. The man clever enough to track me down is clever enough to fish out an iron box from the riverbed. But now that it's scattered over 5 miles, it's a different story. It hurt me to do it, believe me. I was half out of my mind when you caught up, but no use crying over it now. I've had my ups and downs, and I've learned not to weep over spilled milk.
This is a very serious matter, Small. If you'd helped justice instead of blocking it, you might have stood a better chance in court.
Justice? That's a joke. Whose loot is it if not ours? And where's the justice in me giving it up to people who never earned it? Do you know how I earned it? 20 long years in a hellish swamp, slaving under the mangrove trees by day, chained up in filthy convict huts by night, eaten alive by mosquitoes, shivering with fever, bullied by every damn black-faced constable who took pleasure in humiliating a white man. That's the price I paid for the Agra treasure. And now you talk to me about justice, just because I can't stand the thought of someone else living in luxury off what should have been mine. I'd rather hang a dozen times or take one of Tonga's poison darts than rot in a convict's cell, knowing someone else is lounging in a palace with my treasure.
The mask of stoic calm had finally slipped away. Small's words spilled out like a storm. His eyes blazed with fury, and his handcuffs rattled from the force of his gestures. Watching him, I could fully understand the terror that had gripped Major Sholto when he realized that the vengeful convict was on his trail.
You forget, we know nothing of all this. We haven't heard your story yet, so we can't say whether justice was ever on your side.
Well, sir, you've been fair with me, even though it's thanks to you that I've got these shackles on my wrists. But I hold no grudge. It was all above board. If you want to hear my story, I won't keep it from you. What I'll say is God's truth, every word. Thanks. You can set the glass beside me. I'll drink if my throat gets dry.
He began his story without hesitation.
I'm a Worcestershire man, born near Pershore. If you go there now, I'm sure you'll find plenty of Smalls still around. I've often thought about going back, but truth is, I was never much of a credit to my family. They were all solid, God-fearing, chapel-going folk, small farmers, well-known and respected in the countryside. But I was always a bit of a drifter. When I was about 18, I got into trouble over a girl and saw no way out except to take the Queen's shilling and enlist. I joined the 3rd Buffs just before they shipped off to India. Didn't get much time to play soldier. I had just learned the basics, how to march, how to handle a musket, when I made the foolish decision to swim across the Ganges. A crocodile got hold of me right in the middle of the river, bit off my right leg clean, just above the knee, like a surgeon's cut. Lucky for me, my sergeant, John Holder, was swimming nearby. He was one of the best swimmers in the army. He grabbed me and paddled me back to shore. I passed out from the blood loss and would have drowned if he hadn't saved me. I spent 5 months in the hospital. When I finally came out, limping with this wooden leg strapped to my stump, I was discharged, unfit for service and unfit for any real work. I was in a pretty bad way, crippled and not even 20 yet. But that injury turned out to be a strange kind of blessing. A man named Abel White, an indigo planter, needed an overseer to keep his workers in line. He happened to be a friend of our colonel, who'd taken a liking to me after the accident. The colonel put in a strong recommendation. The job mostly involved riding around the plantation, keeping an eye on the coolies, and reporting anyone slacking off. Since most of it was done on horseback, my leg wasn't a huge problem. I still had enough of my knee left to stay steady in the saddle. The pay was decent. The quarters were comfortable, and I was all set to spend the rest of my life managing indigo. Mr. Abel White was a good man. He often dropped by my little hut for a smoke. You see, out in India, white men feel a kinship with one another that they never quite feel back home. Well, luck never stayed long with me. Without warning, the Great Mutiny broke out. One moment, India looked calm, peaceful as Surrey or Kent, and the next, it turned into utter chaos. I reckon you gentlemen already know plenty about that time, probably more than I do, since reading's never been my habit. I only know what my own eyes saw. Our plantation was near a place called Mutra, close to the northwest provinces. At night, the sky burned red with the flames from bungalows, and by day, bands of terrified Europeans with wives and kids passed through our state on their way to Agra, the nearest safe post. Mr. Abel White, though, was a stubborn man. He insisted it was all blown out of proportion, and that the trouble would vanish as quickly as it had started. So, there he'd sit on the veranda, whiskey in one hand and a cheroot in the other, while the countryside fell apart around him. I stayed by him, along with Dawson and his wife, who helped manage the place and kept the accounts. Then one day, everything collapsed. I'd been away checking another plantation, and as I rode back that evening, I spotted something at the bottom of a steep ditch. When I went closer, my heart turned to ice. It was Dawson's wife, horribly mutilated, half devoured by wild dogs. A little further along lay Dawson himself, face down, dead, with his empty revolver beside him. For sepoys lay dead in front of him. He'd taken some of them with him. That much was clear. I was frozen for a moment, unsure where to go. Then I saw smoke rising from Abel White's bungalow, the roof catching fire, the flames spreading. From where I stood, I could see scores of rebels in their red coats dancing and shouting around the fire. Some spotted me and fired. 2 bullets zipped past my head. I didn't wait. I dashed across the paddy fields and didn't stop till I reached the walls of Agra late that night. But Agra wasn't safe either. The whole land was like a disturbed hornet's nest. Everywhere, English folks held out only where their guns would protect them. Otherwise, they were hunted like animals. And the worst part, our enemies, foot soldiers, cavalry, and gunners, were the very troops we had trained ourselves. They fought us using our own weapons and signals. At Agra, we had the 3rd Bengal Fusiliers, a few Sikh companies, some cavalry, and artillery. A volunteer force of merchants and clerks had been raised, and I joined them, wooden leg and all. We marched to Shahgunj in July, fought the rebels, and pushed them back. But then our powder ran out, and we had to retreat into the city. From every direction came news of massacre and horror. If you check a map, you'll see we were surrounded. Lucknow over 100 miles to the east, Kanpur the same distance south. Nowhere was safe. Agra is a huge city, crawling with zealots and strange devil worshippers. We couldn't hold the city's narrow alleys, so our commander moved us to the old fort across the river. That place was the strangest I've ever seen, and I've seen plenty. It stretched out across acres. One part was modern, where we housed the troops, women, and supplies. But the old quarter was massive, abandoned, and full of twisting passages, giant halls, and deadly insects. Most avoided it. Only torch-bearing patrols dared enter now and then. The river guarded the fort's front, but there were doors on the sides and rear that needed watching. We were short-handed, so we set up a central guard post and placed a white soldier and 2 native troopers at each gate. I was given command of the small, lonely gate on the southwest side. I had 2 Sikhs under me, Muhammad Singh and Abdullah Khan, both veterans from Chillianwala. They weren't chatty. They mostly spoke their own language, even though they knew some English. At night, I'd stand outside the gate, staring at the river and the distant lights. The drums, tom-toms, and drunken rebel cries reminded us that the enemy was never far. Every couple of hours, the officer of the night made his rounds. The 3rd night, it was dark and wet, a miserable vigil. I tried talking to the Sikhs again, but they didn't respond. After the officer passed at 2 a.m., I decided to light my pipe and set my musket aside. That's when they struck. Before I could react, one snatched up my gun and aimed at my head. The other pressed a blade to my throat. I froze. My first thought was that they were the rebels, and that meant doom for everyone in the fort. I nearly screamed to alert the main guard, but the one holding the knife read my intent. He leaned in and told me not to shout, assuring me the rebels weren't nearby, and something in his tone convinced me he was telling the truth. So I kept still. I realized that if I made a sound, I was a dead man. All I could do was wait to find out what they were after. The taller and more intense of the two, the one called Abdullah Khan, fixed me with his eyes and told me coldly that I had to choose, either join them or be silenced forever. The plan was too big to risk hesitation. He demanded that I give them my oath, swearing on the Christian cross, that I'd be with them heart and soul, or they'd kill me on the spot and flee to the rebel army. No middle ground. I had just 3 minutes to choose, life or death. I told him I couldn't make such a decision without knowing what they were asking of me, but I made it clear if it endangered the fort in any way, I wanted no part of it. I'd rather die. He assured me it had nothing to do with the safety of the fort. What they offered was wealth, what every Englishman supposedly came to India for. If I agreed that night, they would swear an oath on their knives and their honor as Sikhs that I would get a full quarter of a great treasure they were about to seize. It would be a fair, equal share among the four of us. When I asked what treasure he was talking about, he made me swear an oath first, by the bones of my father, the honor of my mother, and the cross of my faith, that I wouldn't betray them, now or ever. I agreed on the condition that the fort's safety wouldn't be compromised. That satisfied him. He then promised that the treasure would be divided equally, 1/4 each to himself, Muhammad Singh, Dost Akbar, and me. I noticed something then. I thought there were only 3 of them. He explained that Dost Akbar, his foster brother, was bringing the target, the so-called merchant, right to our gate that night. He went on to tell me the backstory. A certain Raj in the north was incredibly wealthy. Though his lands were small, he had inherited much from his father and hoarded even more on his own. He was a miser, keeping gold and silver in vaults, but his most precious gems and pearls. Those he packed in an iron chest. When the rebellion broke out, he played both sides. Eventually, thinking the British were finished, he sided with the rebels but made sure to protect his jewels. He sent that iron box with a trusted servant, disguised as a merchant named Ahmed, who was to hide inside the Agra fort until peace returned. This Ahmed had reached Agra and wanted to enter the fort. With him was Dost Akbar, who knew the box's secret. The plan was simple. Akbar would lead Ahmed to our lonely side gate, this very post, where we would be waiting. No one else would know. Ahmed would disappear forever, and the treasure would be ours. Now, back in Worcestershire, taking a man's life would seem a dreadful thing. But here, in the middle of war and slaughter, death had become ordinary. I won't lie. The thought of the treasure stirred something in me. I imagined going back home a rich man. Still, Abdullah Khan pressed me further. Sensing I hadn't fully committed, he argued that if Ahmed were caught by British officers, he'd be executed and the jewels seized by the government. No one would gain. But if we took them, well, then we'd each be made wealthy. No one knew about the plan, and the post was isolated. It was perfect. Finally, I gave in completely. I told him I was with them, heart and soul. He nodded and returned my musket, saying they trusted me, just as I now trusted them. We had only to wait for Dost Akbar and the merchant. I asked if his brother knew the plan, and he told me it had been his idea all along. We went back to the gate to take up the watch with Muhammad Singh. The rain kept falling. It was the start of the wet season. Heavy clouds drifted across the sky, and visibility was poor. A moat stretched before our gate, though the water was mostly dried. I stood there in the dark, waiting alongside 2 wild-looking Punjabis for a man who had no idea what fate awaited him. Suddenly, I spotted the flicker of a lantern on the far side of the moat. It disappeared among the mounds, then appeared again, slowly approaching. I whispered, "Here they are." Abdullah told me to challenge the man as usual, to keep things normal and not raise suspicion. I was to send them in with Ahmed, and they would handle the rest. I uncovered the lantern, ready to make sure it was indeed their target. 2 dark shapes emerged from the shadows. I let them wade to the muddy moat and climb halfway up to the gate before I challenged them in a low voice. A reply came back. Friends, I threw light on them. The first figure was an enormous Sikh, tall as I'd ever seen, with a beard that nearly reached his waist. The second was a short, plump man in a bright yellow turban, holding a bundle wrapped in a shawl. He trembled all over, his eyes darting like a frightened mouse. It chilled me, thinking of what was to come, but the treasure hardened my heart. When he saw me, the merchant gave a gasp of relief and hurried forward, begging for my protection. He said he had journeyed across Rajputana to reach the fort, had been robbed and mistreated, and now finally felt safe with both his life and his precious bundle. When I asked the man what was in the bundle, he told me it was just an iron box, filled with some family matters that weren't valuable to others, but deeply precious to him. He added that he wasn't a beggar and promised to reward both me and my commanding officer if he was given shelter inside the fort. I didn't let the conversation go on any further. The longer I looked at his frightened, round face, the harder it became to follow through with what was about to happen. The only way was to end it quickly. So I simply said, "Take him to the main guard." The two Sikhs flanked him immediately, with a tall giant walking just behind. Together, they led him into the darkness of the fort. He was surrounded by death, and he didn't even know it. I stayed back at the gate with my lantern. I listened to the sound of their boots echoing through the deserted corridors. Then it stopped. I heard muffled voices, then a scuffle, blows, a struggle. A second later, to my horror, I heard rapid footsteps charging toward me. I raised my lantern toward the passage, and there he was, the fat merchant, bolting toward me, his face streaked with blood, and right behind him, like a panther, was a giant black-bearded Sikh, knife glinting in the dim light. The merchant ran faster than I've ever seen a man run. He was gaining ground. If he had passed me and reached open space, he might have escaped. My heart almost gave in. I felt for the man. But then the thought of the treasure crushed that softness inside me. I threw my musket between his legs, and he tumbled headlong, rolling twice like a rabbit that's been shot. Before he could even rise, the Sikh caught up and drove the knife into him. Twice. He never made a sound or moved again. I think the fall might have broken his neck. Whatever the case, he was gone. You see, gentlemen, I gave my word I'd tell everything exactly as it happened, whether it made me look good or bad. I'm not leaving anything out.
He paused for a moment, lifting his shackled hands slightly toward the glass of whiskey and water Holmes had poured. Watching him, I felt a quiet horror begin to rise in me. Not just because of what he'd done, but because of how casually, how almost indifferently he spoke about it. Holmes and Jones remained silent, their faces drawn and rigid with barely concealed disgust. Perhaps Small sensed it, for his tone shifted slightly, growing sharper, almost defiant, as he continued.
Yes, it was a terrible business. But tell me, how many in my place would have refused that kind of fortune, knowing they'd be killed anyway if they didn't cooperate? And once the merchant had entered the fort, it was either his life or mine. If he'd escaped, we'd all be exposed. I would have been court-martialed and likely shot. Those were brutal times.
Please, go on with your story.
The three of us, Abdullah, Akbar, and I, carried the merchant's body deeper inside. For such a short man, he was heavy. Muhammad Singh stayed behind to guard the door. We went to a place the Sikhs had already chosen, a crumbling old hall at the end of a long, winding corridor. The walls were half broken, and the earthen floor had sunk in one corner, forming a kind of shallow grave. We placed Ahmed's body there and covered him with loose bricks. With that done, we turned our attention to the treasure. It lay right where he had dropped it during the struggle. The box, it's the same one that's now sitting open on your table, had a silk cord looped around a carved handle, and the key hung from it. We opened the box, and I'll never forget the sight. The lantern light struck the gems, and it was like staring into the sun. We took everything out and cataloged it. There were 143 diamonds, including one they called the Great Mogul, said to be the second largest in existence. 97 top-grade emeralds, 170 rubies, some small, but many magnificent, 40 carbuncles, Over 200 sapphires, 61 agates, and piles of beryls, cat's eyes, onyxes, turquoises. Stones I didn't even recognize them, but I've since learned their names. And pearls. Nearly 300 of them, 12 of which were set in a gold coronet. By the way, that coronet was missing when I recovered the chest later. After we'd satisfied ourselves with the count, we placed everything back in a box and carried it to the gate to show Muhammad Singh. Then, the four of us renewed our sacred oath to remain loyal to each other, to keep the secret and never betray it. We agreed to hide the treasure until the war was over. It wasn't safe to divide it yet. Gems like those would raise suspicion, and there was nowhere secure in a fort to keep them individually. So we took the chest back to the same hall where we'd buried the body. Beneath the best preserved wall, we pried out bricks to make a hollow and hid the box there. We marked the location carefully. The next day, I drew up 4 identical plans showing the hiding spot and signed each one with the mark of the 4 of us. We had sworn that no man would act alone. All decisions would be for the 4. And on that oath, I can still swear I never once broke it. There's no need for me to go over the whole Indian mutiny with you, gentlemen. You already know how it ended. Once Wilson took Delhi and Sir Colin Campbell relieved Lucknow, the worse it was done. Reinforcements kept arriving, and Nana Sahib slipped away over frontier. Colonel Grade led a flying column to Agra and drove the rebels out. The land began to settle again, and the 4 of us, Abdullah, Akbar, Muhammad Singh, myself, started to believe the time was coming when we could make off with our share of the treasure. But it all came crashing down in an instant. We were arrested for the murder of Ahmed. Turns out the Raja, being suspicious, hadn't just trusted Ahmed to deliver the jewels. He had secretly sent another, even more trusted servant to follow him and keep an eye on him. That man shadowed Ahmed to the fort's postern gate, but never saw him come out. The next day, he applied for entry into the fort himself, claiming he'd lost track of the merchant. No one could find any trace of Ahmed. This seemed odd, so he reported it to a sergeant of guides, and before long the commandant was informed. A thorough search was ordered, and they found the body. We were seized and put on trial. 3 of us because we had guarded that gate, and the 4th, Dost Akbar, because he'd been seen in the merchant's company. The jewels were never mentioned in court. The Raja had been deposed and fled the country, so no one had an interest in them. But the murder was plain enough. All 4 of us were convicted. The Sikhs got life in penal servitude. I was sentenced to hang, but it was later reduced to the same as theirs. Imagine our situation. We were chained and doomed, each holding a secret that could have made us rich beyond dreams. Yet there we were, getting slapped around by every petty official, living on rice and water, while a king's fortune lay buried under bricks in Agra. It nearly drove me mad, but I'm a stubborn man, so I endured it and I waited. Eventually, my chance came. I was transferred from Agra to Madras, then from there to the convict settlement on Blair Island in the Andamans. Not many white men were imprisoned there, and since I had a good record, they gave me a bit of freedom. I had my own hut in Hopetown on Mount Harriet Slope. It a grim place, real with fever and surrounded by cannibal tribes ready to strike with poisoned darts if given a chance. Our days were filled with digging, planting, ditching, you name it. But we had a few quiet hours in the evenings. During that time, I learned a bit of medicine from the surgeon, picked up some drug knowledge, too. Still, my eyes were always looking for a chance to escape. But that part of the ocean is calm and windless. You could drift for weeks without reaching land. It was nearly impossible. Dr. Somerton, the surgeon, was a fun-loving, sport-obsessed fellow. Every evening, officers would gather in his quarters to play cards. The surgery where I worked was next to the sitting room, and a small window between the 2 rooms let me overhear everything if I turned out my lamp and stood quietly. I enjoyed the sound of their play. It was almost like sitting at the table myself. I often heard the same names: Major Sholto, Captain Morstan, Lieutenant Bromley Brown, and some crafty old prison officials. It was always the same. The soldiers would lose and the civilians would win. It didn't take a genius to see what was happening. The soldiers weren't seasoned gamblers, while those prison men had been playing cards every night for years. The soldiers would win now and then, just enough to stay hopeful, but then they'd lose heavily again. Major Shoto was hit the hardest. At first, he lost cash. Then it turned into IOUs. He was spiraling down, and he started drinking too much. One night, he lost more than usual. I was sitting in my hut when he and Captain Morstan stumbled by on their way to their quarters. The two of them were extremely close, almost inseparable. The Major was furious about how much he had lost. As they passed, I overheard him telling Morstan that he was finished, that he'd have to resign, that he was ruined. Morstan tried to reassure him, saying he too would face a harsh setback, but I couldn't make out the rest. Still, it got me thinking. A few days later, I saw Major Shoto strolling alone on the beach, and I seized the opportunity to speak with him. I approached him and told him I needed his advice. When he asked what it was about, I said I wanted to know who was the right authority to hand over hidden treasure to. I told him I knew where a fortune worth $500,000 was buried. Since I couldn't use it myself, I thought maybe the best course would be to hand it over to the authorities, and maybe they'd consider shortening my sentence in return. He stared at me in shock when I said $500,000. I assured him it was true, jewels and pearls lying there for the taking. The strange part was that the legal owner was an outlaw who couldn't possess property. So, essentially, it belonged to whoever found it. He mumbled something about it belonging to the government, but the hesitation in his voice told me I had caught his interest. I pressed him, asking whether he thought I should inform the Governor General. He urged me not to act impulsively and asked me to tell him the full story. I did, though I altered a few details, so he couldn't trace the exact locations. When I was done, he stood frozen, deep in thought. I could see from the way his lips twitched that he was fighting something inside himself. Eventually, he said it was a serious matter and that I should speak to no one else about it. He promised to return soon. 2 nights later, he and Captain Morstan came to my hut, carrying a lantern. Shoto told me he wanted Morstan to hear the story from my own mouth, so I repeated it just as I had before. Afterward, Shoto asked if it sounded convincing and whether it was worth acting on. Morstan silently nodded. Then Shoto said that he and Morstan had discussed it and concluded that my secret didn't concern the government at all. It was my personal matter. Since I had control over it, they wanted to know what price I'd put on it. They might be interested in getting involved if we could agree on terms. He tried to appear casual, but the excitement and greed in his eyes were obvious. I tried to stay calm too, though I was just as worked up as he was. I told him that I had only one kind of deal to offer. I want to help secure my freedom and the freedom of my 3 comrades. In exchange, we'd bring them in as partners and give them a 5th share to divide between the 2 of them. Shoto grumbled that a 5th share wasn't too tempting. I reminded him that it would come to 50,000 each. He then raised the issue of how they could possibly get us released. He called it an impossibility, but I told him I had it all planned. Our only obstacle was getting a seaworthy boat and enough provisions. There were plenty of small yachts in Calcutta or Madras that would serve. I asked them to bring one across. We'd make sure to board it at night. If they could drop us off somewhere on the Indian coast, they'd have fulfilled their part of the bargain. Shoto replied that if it were just me alone, it might be doable. I told him flatly that it was either all of us or none. The 4 of us had sworn to stick together. Then he turned to Morstan and pointed out how I was a man of my word, loyal to my friends, and that they could trust me. Morstan responded that it was a shady business, but the money would certainly help save their careers. Finally, Shoto said they would try to come to an agreement with me. But first, they had to verify whether my story was true. He asked me to reveal where the box was hidden, promising that he would request leave and return to India on the next relief boat to investigate. I stopped him right there. The more excited he got, the colder I became. I made it clear that I needed my comrades' consent. It was all 4 of us or none. He snapped back, saying what did 3 black men have to do with their agreement? I told him that black or blue, they were in it with me. We all go together. Finally, Shoto said they would try to come to an agreement with me. But first, they had to verify whether my story was true. He asked me to reveal where the box was hidden, promising that he would request leave and returned to India on the next relief boat to investigate. I stopped him right there. The more excited he got, the colder I became. I made it clear that I needed my comrade's consent. It was all four of us or none. He snapped back, saying what did 3 black men have to do with their agreement? I told him that black or blue, they were in it with me. We all go together. Well, gentlemen, I fear I've exhausted you with this long tale, and I can tell my friend Mr. Jones is more than ready to see me locked up, so I'll keep it brief from here on. That villain Sholto did go back to India, but he never returned. Captain Morstan later showed me his name listed among the passengers of a mailboat not long after. Apparently, his uncle had passed away and left him a fortune. He'd left the army and yet still had the gall to betray 5 men who had trusted him. Morstan himself traveled to Agra soon after and, as we feared, discovered the treasure was gone. The scoundrel had taken it all for himself, violating every single condition we had placed when we gave him the secret. From that moment on, my life became centered around revenge. I thought about it constantly during the day and nurtured it through the night. It consumed me entirely. The law meant nothing. The gallows meant nothing. All I cared about was escaping, hunting Sholto down, and gripping him by the throat. The Agra treasure itself faded in importance. It was the act of bringing Sholto down that obsessed me. Now, I've set my mind to many goals in life, and I've never failed to achieve one yet. But it took long, bitter years before my chance came. As I mentioned before, I'd learned a bit about medicine. One day, when Dr. Summon was laid up with fever, a little Andaman islander was discovered by a convict gang in the woods. He was gravely ill and had retreated to die alone. I took charge of his care, even though he was as vicious as a young cobra. After a couple of months, I nursed him back to health. From then on, he became attached to me, refused to return to the forest, and spent all his time around my hut. I managed to pick up a bit of his language, and that seemed to endear me to him even more. His name was Tonga, and he was a skilled boatman who owned a large, sturdy canoe. Once I realized how loyal he'd become, willing to do anything for me, I saw my opportunity. I laid out the plan for him. He would sail his canoe to a certain old wharf that was never guarded and pick me up there on an appointed night. I gave him precise instructions to bring several gourds of fresh water and a supply of yams, coconuts, and sweet potatoes. Tonga was loyal to the core. No man ever had a more faithful companion. On the appointed night, he brought his boat to the old wharf as planned. But as fate would have it, one of the convict guards was down there, a hateful Pathan who had always gone out his way to insult and abuse me. I had long sworn I'd settle the score, and now fate had handed me the chance. He was standing with his back to me, his carbine slung over his shoulder. I looked around for a rock to smash his skull, but there wasn't one in sight. Then a strange idea came to me. I could use my wooden leg. So I unstrapped in the dark, and with 3 long hops I was on him. He raised his gun, but I struck him with all I had, smashing in the front of the skull. You can still see the crack in my wooden leg from that blow. We both went down since I lost my balance, but when I got up, he was lying there dead still. I made my way to Tonga's boat, and within the hour, we were out at sea. Tonga had brought all he owned, his weapons and his gods. Among them was a long bamboo spear and some coconut matting from the Andamans, which I turned into a makeshift sail. For 10 days, we drifted, hoping for the best. On the 11th day, we were picked up by a trader en route from Singapore to Jeddah with a load of Malay pilgrims. Strange folk, but Tonga and I fit in well enough. They had one admirable trait. They minded their own business and asked no questions. I could keep you all day with the tales of what Tonga and I went through after that, but I doubt you'd thank me for it. We wandered here and there around the world, always with something cropping up that kept us from reaching London. Still, I never lost sight of my goal. Every night I dreamed of Sholto. In my dreams, I must have killed him 100 times. Then finally, about 3 or 4 years ago, we found ourselves in England. It didn't take me long to track down where Shoto lived. I got in touch with someone, no names, because I won't drag anyone else into this. And through them, I found out that Shoto still had the jewels. I made several attempts to get at him, but he was a clever man, always well protected. He kept 2 prize fighters, along with his sons and a personal servant, constantly around him. Then came the news I'd been waiting for. He was dying. I rushed straight to his garden, furious at the thought that he might escape my vengeance. Peering through the window, I saw him lying in bed with his sons on either side. I was ready to burst in and take my chances, but right then I watched his jaw fall slack. I knew he was gone. That very night, I broke into his room and rifled through his papers, hoping he'd left some clue about the treasure's location. But there wasn't a word, nothing. I left bitter, angrier than I'd ever been. Before I went, though, I scrawled the sign of the 4, just like on the old chart, and pinned it to his chest. I wanted it known that the men he betrayed had not forgotten. In those days, Tonga and I earned a living by exhibiting him at fairs as a black cannibal. He'd eat raw meat and perform a war dance, which always drew a crowd and earned us a handful of coins. I kept tabs on Pondicherry Lodge the whole time. For years, there was no news, except that they were still searching for the treasure. But eventually, the news came. We had waited so long. The treasure had been found. It was hidden at the top of the house in Bartholomew Shoto's chemistry lab. I went at once to check out the place, but I couldn't figure out how to get up there with my wooden leg. Then I heard about a trapdoor in the roof and learned Mr. Shoto's supper schedule. It became clear I could manage the job through Tonga. I took him with me, with a long rope cord around his waist. He could climb like a cat, and he made it up easily. Unfortunately, Bartholomew was still in the room. Tonga, thinking he had done something clever, killed him. When I climbed up, I found him strutting around, proud of himself. I lashed out at him with the rope's end and scolded him for being such a bloodthirsty little devil. I took the treasure box, lowered it down, and then climbed down myself, after leaving the sign of the 4 on the table, so it would be known the treasure had returned to those with the most rightful claim. Tonga then pulled up the rope, closed the window, and slipped out the way he came. That's just about everything. I heard a waterman mention the speed of a boat called the Aurora, owned by a man named Smith, and I figured she'd make the perfect getaway craft. I made a deal with old Smith, promised him a large sum if he got us safely to our ship. I'm sure he knew something was off, but he wasn't privy to our secrets. And all of this, everything I've told you, is the truth. I'm not saying it to entertain you. After all, you haven't exactly done me any favors. I say it because the best defense I can make is full honesty. Let the world know how I was wronged by Major Shoto, and that I had no hand in the death of his son.
A very remarkable account. A fitting wind-up to an extremely interesting case. There's nothing at all new to me in the latter part of your narrative, except that you brought your own rope. That I did not know. By the way, I had hoped that Tonga had lost all his darts, yet he managed to shoot one at us in the boat.
He had lost them all, sir, except the one which was already in his blowpipe.
Ah, of course. I hadn't thought of that.
Is there any other point you'd like to ask about?
Holmes gave a polite nod.
I think not. Thank you.
Well, Holmes, you're a man to be humored, and we all know you're a connoisseur of crime. But duty is duty, and I've gone rather far in doing what you and your friend asked of me. I'll feel more at ease once our storyteller here is safe under lock and key. The cab is still waiting, and there are 2 inspectors downstairs. I'm much obliged to both of you for your assistance. Of course, you'll be wanted at the trial. Good night to you.
Good night, gentlemen both.
You first, Small.
Remarked the wary Jones as they left the room.
I'll make quite sure you don't club me with your wooden leg, whatever you may have done to the poor fellow at the Andaman Islands.
Well, there's the end of our little drama. I fear it may be the last investigation in which I'll have the chance to study your methods. Miss Morstan has done me the honor of accepting me as her future husband.
I feared as much. I really cannot congratulate you.
Have you any reason to be dissatisfied with my choice?
Not at all. I think she's one of the most charming young ladies I've ever met, and she might have been quite useful in the kind of work we've been doing. She has a natural gift for it. Just look at how she preserved the agar map from the rest of her father's papers. But love, Watson, is an emotional thing, and emotion stands in direct opposition to the cold, clear reason I value above all. I would never marry, lest it cloud my judgment.
I trust my judgment will survive the ordeal. But you look tired.
Yes, the reaction is already hitting me. I'll be as limp as a rag for a week.
Strange how you can swing from being completely laid back to suddenly bursting with energy and focus.
Yes, in me, there are the makings of both a very fine loafer and a rather spry fellow. I often think of those old lines by Goethe. It's a pity that nature created only one man like you, for you had the makings of both a noble man and a rogue. By the way, speaking of this Norwood business, you see, as I suspected, there was a confederate inside the house. It could have been no one but Lal Rao, the butler. So in the end, Jones does get the solitary honor of having caught one fish in his grand haul.
The division seems rather unfair. You did all the work in this case. I get a wife, Jones gets a credit. What remains for you?
For me, there still remains this.
He reached out his long white hand and picked up the cocaine bottle. And so, the mystery of the Agra treasure reached its end, not with riches gained, but with truths laid bare. In a tale woven with betrayal, vengeance, and forgotten oaths, it was not fortune, but justice that Sherlock Holmes pursued. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle once wrote, "My dear Watson, you see everything. You fail, however, to reason from what you see, and that, precisely, is where Holmes rises above all others." With razor-sharp deduction and unwavering logic, he peered through the fog of lies and led us to clarity, not with weapons, but with wisdom, not with emotion, but with observation. If this tale stirred your thoughts, held your breath, or made you see the world a little differently, we invite you to share your reflections in the comments. Your voices help us keep these legendary stories alive, one case at a time. And if your heart beats for mysteries filled with shadows, secrets, and the brilliance of human intellect, please like, subscribe, and share with fellow minds who seek the truth. For the full immersive experience, we recommend headphones. Until we meet again, stay sharp, stay curious, because sometimes what's buried isn't just treasure, it's the truth. This is Echoes of Stories, where every mystery echoes long after the case is closed.